C291. 73 Infiltration. The dreamlike world, a realm where reality and illusion intertwine, where all impossibilities can be realized. Now, the place where Hypnos stood was an exact replica of once great Mount Othris. These dreams originated from beings who once lived on that divine mountain. Although these beings have long perished, dying together with the mountain in disaster, these ancient dreams themselves endured. Driven by some inner motivation, the god of sleep marked it, but seldom visited the place. However, today, within the palace of the former second-generation divine king, Hypnos gently clapped his hands. Clap, clap, clap. The sound was not loud, yet in the world of dreams, magnitude had no meaning. The next moment, the shimmering of light and shadow unfolded as pathways connecting different dream domains opened one after another. As the third level of the spirit realm, built upon the dreams of all beings, time in the dream spirit realm was inherently chaotic. What was but 10,000 years in the outside world had already seen the passage of times that number here. And in this vast span of time, Hypnos wasn't idle, he supported many capable entities and helped them become lords of the dream domain. A rough count would estimate about a third of the third level of the spirit realm. Without an opportunity, these lords were merely his subordinates, existing to maintain the order of the three levels of the spirit realm. But when the time was right, they too could become soldiers under Hypnos' command. They've all arrived. Soon, more and more beings of the dream domain started appearing in this palace. Once, the second-generation divine king held feasts here for the gods. Now, this place stood filled with spirit realm beings of various forms. Glancing around, the god of sleep nodded in satisfaction. In the realm of the mind, one's self-perception determined their outward appearance, so these lords were all different. Some of them came into being through the devouring of numerous spiritual bodies, and despite inheriting fragmented memories, they still identified with their former existence, maintaining the appearance from before their death. Others were simply born from the dreams of powerful entities, eventually becoming independent, and bore some resemblance to certain deities of the outer world. Some were filled with bizarreness and eccentricity, even life forms that weren't supposed to exist in this era. Like walking dolls, puppets clad in gowns, nobody knew how they came to be. Perhaps it was the jumbled time and fate of the spirit realm, allowing a glimpse of the future to seep through. Of course, no matter their appearance, these spirit realm lords possessed extraordinary powers. They were perhaps only transcendent beings, and only a very few possessed divinity, but in the spirit realm, under the dream domain's enhancement, most of them were quasi-gods, which was also why Hypnos had summoned them. The god of sleep did not expect these subordinates to be of much use, but at the very least, they could help him eliminate some troubles. With a light touch of his hand, formless streams of information floated toward the approaching lords, detailing the tasks he intended for them to carry out. In fact, Hypnos hadn't told a single soul about what he was actually planning to do, even up until that moment. Some things, he knew, were best kept to himself. Follow my orders, go. Once the information transfer was complete, the youthful deity softly commanded. He watched these spirit realm lords leave in various manners, and soon, the palace returned to how it had been not long before. From this moment on, time began its countdown. Success or failure, those were the only two options. Seated on the throne, Hypnos felt emotions that had been absent for a long while begin to stir. He was beginning to understand the psychology of the former occupant of this throne. Perhaps Cronus had similar thoughts when he plotted against the Heavenly Father. It doesn't matter anymore. In the future, all of this will be mine. Following the connections within the dreamscape, the god of sleep cast a glance toward the mortal world. There, a fellow he had encountered several times was stealing souls. That mysterious ritual cut off the spirit realm's natural attraction to souls, and even a portal was being slowly opened. Hypnos made a mental note of the location. He intended to pay close attention to what lay beyond that portal later on. Although Mefisto's actions had distracted attention away from himself, that did not mean they could be tolerated. Once he became the new king of the spirit realm, the first thing he would do was to dismember this bold thief who dared to filch his riches, and then track down the mastermind behind the curtain. It's about time. No need to wait any longer. I didn't expect my dear Father God to have ventured outside, which ironically gives me a greater chance of success. With a smile curling up, despite his confidence in his own authority, Hypnos was well aware that it was only in a surprise attack that his divine authority could be exercised to its fullest extent. In the myths of future generations, the original god of sleep managed to put the near-peaked King Zeus to sleep with the help of the assisting Queen Hera at his side. So compared to a confrontation with Laine over the battle for control of the spirit realm, Hypnos preferred to quietly resolve everything from the shadows. Thus, standing up, the god of sleep's gray wings fluttered slightly, and his figure disappeared from the third level of the spirit realm. Except for a select few, even the gods of the spirit realm needed to ascend the planes step by step, and it was the same for him. Fortunately, it wasn't far, it just required some time. Prince Hypnos, a moonlit greeting to you. Stepping out from the most formal gateway of the fourth layer of the spirit realm, just as he was about to depart, a voice reached his ear. Looking toward the voice, Hypnos unexpectedly found a familiar yet foreign spirit realm angel who also happened to be present. C292. 73 infiltration _2. Familiar, because there are just so many true gods in the spirit realm, and he more or less knew them all. Strange, naturally, because the person in front of him seldom went outside, always staying in his own little world. So, in reality, they had hardly interacted with each other. Peace be with you, Your Highness Evangeline, are you here too? I've been invited to come and take care of Samsara for a while. Although there is no life in this world that can shake the well of reincarnation, there should always be a servant of the owner to guard it. With a tranquil expression, perhaps due to the influence of godhood, even the most ordinary voice of Evangeline sounded like a captivating song. At this moment, the god of sleep felt as if he was listening to the echo of nature, the chirping of hundreds of birds, his very soul seemed to be purified. In a fleeting moment, Hypnos even thought that he should not betray his father god. After all, Laine was not the heavenly father Uranus, he had never committed any tyrannical acts. However, the nature of a deity is not so easily influenced, so this wavering only lasted for an instant. Yet, this still gave the god of sleep a moment of solemn reflection. The authority of a deity is so peculiar, he was confident in his own domain over sleep, and other deities were no different. Evangeline's divine power and his were as different as heaven and earth, yet he still felt a slight influence. But, speaking of Laine, what exactly is his authority? Spirituality belongs to the spirit realm, but what belongs to him? You are right, Your Highness Evangeline. As you said, the well of reincarnation needs a guardian, so I shall not disturb you further. With a gentle smile, Hypnos appeared exceedingly polite. Setting aside his thoughts, regardless, it was indeed a good thing, one less problem to worry about. One must know, normally, Evangeline's divine palace is situated atop Mount Sinai, and should the sneak attack fail, it's very likely she would come to assist quickly. You may the Lord be with you. Nodding slightly, Evangeline didn't ask further about the god of sleep's purpose. In her eyes, he, just like them, was a member of the spirit realm's angels. But when Hypnos heard this phrase, his face stiffened for a moment, then with a polite smile, he headed towards the passage to the fifth layer of the spirit realm. It was always like this. Even though they were all gods nurtured by the grand ancient spirit world, they called Laine the master, as if he was so distinctly different. To mark the distinction, they always referred to themselves as angels, not as gods. Even the gods from the outside world were called false gods by them, something Hypnos really couldn't understand. Being a god nurtured by the spirit realm, the incarnation of sleep should not be worshipping others. Even in Hypnos' mind, the true parents should be the spirit realm itself and the essence of night, not that usurper of divine authority. Soon, passing through the portal to the fifth layer of the spirit realm, a more chaotic space and time unveiled. Hypnos glanced deep into the murky space-time, where, vaguely, a presence similar yet vastly different from his own emanated. The Sun Eater, similarly stained by the chaotic source force, but to what extent he was more severely afflicted, Hypnos could not tell. In the eyes of the god of sleep, there was some pity. Such a powerful life, if it could follow his commands, the chances of success in his journey would be higher. No matter. In the future, all this will be mine. Repeating it once more, Hypnos, following an indistinct sense, hurried towards the passage to the sixth layer of the spirit realm. There lay the most enigmatic part of the spirit realm. Even though he had not seen it yet, the god of sleep felt that even the so-called Tartarus would probably be no different. Meanwhile, in the mortal realm, at the former site of Aurora City, the sea was still surging, even more unpredictable without its controller. As expected, it would wreak havoc in the mortal realm for 5 days, reaching its peak before waning. The great flood of 9 days and nights would completely wash the eastern region of the land. Humans were annihilated, but the strange beasts of the eastern lands also perished in large numbers. Apart from a few strong ones, Those skilled in hiding, and the naturally cunning, the rest were obliterated by this deluge. It would be countless years before other strange beasts from different parts of the continent would migrate there. As a witness to all this, Laine was still reflecting on the sensation he had just experienced. Alchemy, indeed fascinating. On his finger, the emerald ring twinkled with light. Not too long ago, Laine had used this ring, said to transmute stone to gold, to change the properties of matter and raise a bronze column near the ICCs. If the Dropner can replicate itself, turn stone into gold, then naturally it can also turn seawater into bronze. The towering bronze column rose from the sea through its transformation. After all, changing matter was not Laine's area of expertise. Of course, it once again proved its limits. Even if Laine infused as much power as possible into the ring, it still couldn't produce copper containing extraordinary power. That is alchemy. What is doable, what is not is simply not. Without unraveling the principles within, pouring in power alone is pointless. It's good that this is a mythic world where physical laws differ. Otherwise, the mere bronze, unable to sustain the heavens, would not be able to exist in the sea in columnar form and would simply disintegrate on its own. All right, I have fulfilled what I promised Prometheus. The rest is up to humans themselves. C293. 73 infiltration _3. Laine looked at the old man beside him. On his stone carvings, the proud attitude of the son of the sea god and the bronze column hanging in the west heaven were clearly visible. Even gradually, the stone slab itself seemed to have undergone some miraculous changes. The flood is still 9 days away, and your life has only 10 days left. In these last days, is there anything you would like to do? The elder was already due to die a natural death, and even without the great flood, he actually wouldn't have lived much longer. If possible, I'd like to fully document this flood. With a calm demeanor, Humar looked down sentimentally. As far as the eye could see, there were endless seas, but he knew that hidden underneath the water was his once home. A reasonable request. Laine nodded and blessed him. May you see all there is in the mortal realm, and may your records live forever. He said this, and the law responded to Laine's blessing. During the last 10 days of the old man's life, space would not hinder his sight, everything in the mortal realm would be within his view, and after the old man's death, his stone carvings, which documented everything, would also be engulfed in frozen time. They would forever stay in that moment, only touchable by time itself. The sea parted, revealing a path leading under the water. And at the end of the path was the largest temple in Aurora City, once built by Zeus. This special place, different from other temples, was where the divine king condemned the sins of humanity, and forced the faithless madman to kneel indefinitely, so the temple still retained traces of the divine king's authority, and therefore, was not worn away by these ordinary waters. Accompanying you for half a day has been my honor. Before departing, Humar bowed slightly. It's your own choice. Waving his hand, Laine finally said. Go on, this place will soon become a battlefield again. What to leave for future humans, is for you to decide. After Humar left, only Laine remained. He looked down and noticed the black fog that was trying its hardest to conceal its presence. Mefisto knew he couldn't hide from the Lord of the Spirit Realm's perception, but it didn't stop him from pretending it was so. Laine also knew that Mefisto knew he couldn't hide, yet he just smiled and acted as if the demon had ceased to exist. In terms of enhancing divine power, souls were very important to him. For increasing the volume of the spirit realm, the circulation of souls was also important. But to elevate spirituality as a symbol in the world, spreading souls as widely as possible and having their existence recognized by powerful beings was the most effective approach. Thus, regarding the theft of souls, Laine's attitude was, too clear water harbors no fish. If your skills were crafty enough to find loopholes from the deities of the spirit realm, or if it was just a god intercepting 1 or 2 souls, he would generally turn a blind eye. This was also a way to give the deities of the spirit realm something to do, so they wouldn't just stay in their own places all day long without ever stepping out. However, speaking of which, he has been quite quiet this time. Is it because he was too active before? Before leaving, Laine was somewhat surprised. His mind had, in fact, been covertly monitoring the underworld to prevent Erebus from jumping out and causing him trouble again, but nothing had happened. Perhaps the other party was busy with other matters, or perhaps unable to come out at all. Anyway, it was good that he didn't come, as Laine wasn't particularly eager to see him. Shaking his head, Laine stepped out and vanished into the airspace above this sea area. From now on, the affairs of the mortal realm would at most concern his avatar, and have little to do with himself. And underwater, Mefisto sensed Laine's departure and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Phew, he's finally gone, he said. The ritual could have progressed to the second phase much earlier, but he was not the brainless sort like Triton. He worked hard to conceal his tracks. Whether the concealment was effective or not, if others pretended not to see you, they would ignore you. But to brazenly do one's own thing under the watchful eyes of others was simply to court discomfort. After adjusting his clothes, Mefisto sent a message into the distance. Quickly, a figure appeared before him. The demons had not trusted the local deities with the earlier affairs, they always managed to turn good situations bad. However, now the time was almost right, and it was time for the other party to contribute. Looking at the swaying figure of Keto, Mefisto said with a smile. Get ready, we can start the final step. Next, please let me introduce the ruler of realms beyond, the king of the nine hells, the creator of demons, His Excellency Asmodeus. A deity born like you is the most welcome in the nine hells. His Excellency will surely be pleased to learn of your joining. HMPH, I hope so, just in time to witness his power, Keto responded indifferently with a snort. Though Mefisto had often claimed that there were beings even stronger than the divine king in the nine hells, Keto was still skeptical. You will see, I assure you, Mefisto said with a smile. He did not mind Keto's attitude and knew that beings do not understand things beyond their comprehension. Until today, all mortals and gods in the present world held fixed impressions of the abyss, believing it to be empty, filled only with deathly silence and void. But all this was about to end. Stepping forward to the core of the ritual, where a small groove lay on the ground, Mefisto cut his wrist. Although underwater, the dark red blood still fell straight downwards, dripping onto the intricate designs etched there. Tracing the fine patterns, the demon's blood seemed to contain a special energy, quickly lighting up the areas it touched. It started with a few specks and then extended rapidly. From underneath Mefisto's feet and out towards the entirety of Aurora City's ruins. The deep ocean water lacked any light, making the dark luster even more dazzling. At that moment, a certain connection was activated. Like a massive coordinate, the ritual drew the attention of a vast presence from afar. The laws of the current world recognized this power, a force belonging to another aspect of the world. It instinctively rejected it, but not completely. Guard this place well, Mefisto commanded. Retracting his hand, the small wound healed instantly. In the void surrounding Aurora City, one after another, powerful presences were approaching. Mefisto was not afraid, just slightly surprised. The gods of the spirit realm came so quickly, which he could understand, but what about that other one? No matter, Mefisto said. With a smile, he glanced at the thick cluster of souls around him. With so many achievements, and more than one benevolent god actively contributing to his cause, he wondered how many ranks he should ascend. Ahead of this, the demon looked forward with some anticipation. C-294. 74. The Descent. Abyss. As the ritual in the mortal realm began to operate, the 9 overlapped worlds within the abyss felt its resonance. Unlike the spirit realm, which corresponds directly with the surface and material worlds, if hell and the mortal realm were to open a passage between them, a coordinate, an anchor point, was needed to connect the two. The ritual layout by Mefisto was undoubtedly such a marker. It originated from the hand of Asmodeus, who as a former god of time and space, still had a profound understanding of it. At this moment, as the sensing with the coordinate became clearer, an illusory portal slowly emerged on the second layer of hell. Rolling lava churned across the land, influenced by the Flame Kingdom, some volcanoes and magma slowly came into existence within the 9 hells. At this moment, Asmodeus and the former god of meteorology, Creus, stood together, watching the illusory light gate gradually solidify. The mortal realm and hell were isolated from each other, which meant they were not very clear about what was happening on the other side. However, since Mefisto had opened the gateway as scheduled, everything likely went smoothly without any unforeseen events. If you wish, you can also go to the mortal realm, to Olympus. I know you've always harbored resentment regarding being cast into the abyss, said the Lord of the 9 hells with his hands clasped behind his back, smiling. Though it was his first return to the world he once ruled after the transition of eras, he bore no other emotions. It was merely a matter of time, today was just the beginning. And what about you, Your Majesty, do you intend to go to the mortal realm as your former self or as you are now? A flicker of intent passed through his eyes, but Creus still spoke up. Formerly. Hey, it's not the time yet. Although I have taken a small step, I'm still a far cry from my revered mother goddess. After all, the 9 hells haven't been around for that long. Since I cannot overturn Olympus under the suppression of the laws of the mortal realm, there's no need to arouse more vigilance among others. Let's wait for the future. Compared to Zeus, I'd rather go and see my loyal subordinates. With some nostalgia, the Lord of the Nine Hells looked to his side. Someone had always been by his side, but she ultimately chose to go against him. I was a terrible divine king. No one wished to stand by my side, not even my sister who had been with me for thousands of years. Fortunately, his existence made me feel somewhat capable. I left too hastily before. After all, I hadn't expected such an opportunity in the abyss. This time I must tell him that I've never forgotten about him, and he will always be my most trusted guard. Then I won't go either. Shaking his head lightly, Creus said, I'll go with you to Mount Olympus when you're ready to step there in the name of Cronus. What's the point of just unsettling Zeus for the time being? Although I can't compare to that young man, please let me lead your vanguard when the time comes. Don't go easy then. Ha ha ha. Very well. Laughing heartily, the Lord of the Nine Hells looked up slightly. His gaze pierced through the boundary wall and caught the eye of the great serpent. Then wait just a moment, Creus. Let me first see what accomplishments that young man, who made bold claims before me, has truly made. As his words ended, Asmodeus took a step forward. The illusory light gate trembled but ultimately stabilized. The light shifted, as though a minute had passed, or perhaps a long while, but when everything settled, the Lord of the Nine Hells found himself above the dark seabed. There were no spectacular phenomena, not even an audience, just a single presence welcomed another extraordinary being in silence in this area of the sea. Greetings, Your Majesty, you have finally come, said Mefisto, bowing before the Lord of the Nine Hells who had been long awaited. My apologies for the wait, Mefisto. It seems your journey wasn't exactly smooth sailing, remarked the Lord of the Nine Hells as he surveyed his surroundings. Countless spiritual bodies, including those of humans as well as other creatures from the Great Plains, amassed in the millions, more than the entire silver humanity of the past. However, he didn't immediately discuss them, given the somewhat unusual environment of their current meeting. It wasn't as difficult as imagined, Your Majesty. Humans and gods alike, they all like to be too clever for their own good, said Mefisto, with a slight smile. Apart from a few exceptions, the souls of the entire bronze humanity are here, along with quite a few of the beasts, whose souls are even superior to that of ordinary humans. Mefisto proudly presented his achievement with a modest smile. All of them? How did you accomplish this? Asmodeus was somewhat taken aback and struggled to conceive how this silver human had gathered all the souls of humanity. Especially in the present conditions, such a sea swallowing up the land was within only the power of the sea god. That's a long story, which I owe to the creator of mankind who provided me with this opportunity. But Your Majesty, regarding the details of my journey in the mortal realm, I will explain them to you in due course. However, I have recruited a special lady for the Nine Hells, and the commotion of contacting you may have attracted some attention. I understand. Nodding, Asmodeus wasn't oblivious to the commotion in the sky. He gestured behind him and the gateway they had just used turned into a vortex, to which the countless surrounding souls immediately began to surge in. C295. 74. The Descent _2. You've done well. Although you've only completed half of the tasks in the mortal world, our bet can be settled in part now. Now, this place is mine to handle. With one step, the Lord of Hell vanished without a trace. Behind him, Mefisto bowed in the direction of his departure and then cheerfully stepped through the illusory whirl with the souls. The rest was no longer of any concern to the demons, their part was done, and presumably, the daughter of the original sea god faced no issues. Soon, the waters quieted again, only the sound of souls passing through continuing endlessly. A spectrum of light streaked across the sky. The gentle flames surrounding the light dispelled the chill of the downpour. The gaze of the goddess of Hearthfire swept over the ocean's surface, but there were only waves upon waves. Earlier, at the feast on Olympus, Hestia had left early due to her dissatisfaction with Poseidon's attitude. However, after leaving the divine palace, she didn't return to her own hall but instead came to the surface of Earth. She intended to visit the descendants of the deities, Prometheus's son Deucalion and his brother's daughter Pytha. Though unspoken, they were allowed to survive after the deluge because the gods all knew the divine king would no longer permit any god to enjoy the credit for creating humans. Moreover, there was no longer a need for gods to create humans. Creation was always arduous, but imitation was quite different. After 3 human ages, with the assistance of the gods, creating humans wasn't as difficult as imagined. What was truly crucial was crafting their materials. Fortunately, the gods were well prepared for this task. What is this? Some kind of dark power. Suspended in midair, Hestia's brows furrowed. The sullen light surged up through the water, mirroring the heavy clouds in the sky. Before, halfway through her journey, Hestia had abruptly changed direction. No longer within Olympus, she couldn't constantly observe what was happening in the cities of humans, but the trident flying towards the Mount of the Gods and the changes in the northwest of the land were still distinctly visible. The disaster that was to annihilate humanity underwent an unforeseen change, one that the gods had not anticipated. Thus, the goddess came here immediately, wishing to uncover what had occurred. Yet everything seemed empty. She found nothing. It wasn't until she hovered above the ruins of the human cities that she keenly sensed something amiss. A set of laws different from the mortal world emanated from beneath the water, an inexplicable sense of oppression looming over the goddess of hearthfire. It was somewhat reminiscent of the sensation she had when traveling to the spirit realm, a feeling of not belonging to the surrounding world, but by comparison, the goddess felt somewhat relieved. The normal rule in the mortal world that forbade deities from using their powers seemed to be somewhat diluted by this novel law. This foreign law wasn't amiable towards Hestia, but in some way, it released a fraction of her power. Thus the goddess no longer hesitated and pressed her hand downward. Boom! A muffled sound erupted, and the ocean surface crackled open, but after extending less than 100 meters, Hestia's divine power was blocked by another figure. Focusing her gaze, with only a bit of hesitation, the goddess recognized the newcomer. She had appeared more than once at the feasts on Olympus, but it seemed she had not been seen much over the past few decades. Keto, why are you here? Do I need to report my whereabouts to you? Within the currents, Keto, the mother of sea monsters in myth, retorted unfazed. Quote. No need, but the divine king has designated this place a forbidden zone, forbidding ordinary deities from coming here. You might not be aware of this, but what's happening below? Ignoring Keto's somewhat provocative tone, Hestia looked downward. But she could see nothing of use. Darkness naturally held the quality of secrecy, and although the powers wielded by demons fell short when compared to the Dark Overlord, this place wasn't Olympus where divine power could be freely used. Hence, the goddess saw only some vague, quivering, transparent shadows that vanished as quickly as they had appeared. The gods have annihilated humanity, but I'm quite interested in their creations, so I came here to ask their departed souls a few questions. This shouldn't violate the laws of the divine court, right? Following Mephisto's previous instructions, Keto stalled. And true enough, after hearing her explanation, Hestia didn't know what to say. If it was merely about seizing a few human souls, indeed it wouldn't be a big deal, and the divine court wouldn't trouble itself with the offspring of the original sea god. But in light of recent events at this location, the goddess thought something didn't quite add up. Do you know what happened here earlier, and where is Triton? Not pursuing the matter beneath the waters, Hestia asked about her nephew. How would I know? Perhaps he left on his own. Keto offhandedly replied, her lack of sincerity apparent. Quote. I hope that's the case. Frowning, even the usually good-natured Hestia was somewhat irritated. She gave Keto a glance and finally decided to go down herself for a probe. Under no circumstance would she trust the other's word. A few human souls, how could they cause a disturbance on the level of the laws? However, the next moment, the goddess of Hearthfire's expression drastically changed. She looked toward the eastern sky, and as she watched, several unfamiliar figures emerged from the void. C296. 74. The Descent _3. On them, there was the breath of the stars, the rotation of the seasons, but without exception, they were all true deities. You are. Is it you who are stealing souls? The essence of autumn surrounded her, and Aranis interrupted in a cold voice. Faced with the questioning, Hestia also realized something. Stealing souls, are you the gods of the spirit realm? Keto, what exactly have you done? Turning to look at Keto, divine power began to swirl around the goddess. Her guess was indeed correct, the other party was definitely not just stealing a few souls. The gods had not neglected the study of the souls of mortal beings, but no one would care about one or two such incidents. Then it seems it was you who did it. Another figure stepped out of the void, her purple dress swaying. Liana's expression was cold and indifferent. Different from Aranis, behind the goddess of the nether moon, the phantom of the purple moon ebbed and flowed, its moonlight revealing all that was hidden beneath. The scene beneath the sea was finally exposed, if only a corner. Spiritual bodies were faintly visible, covering the entire seabed. Seeing this, Liana's expression grew even colder. There's no need for words, take her back to the well of reincarnation. Since she dared to steal from the Lord, let her pay with her eternal life. The illusory moonlight emerged behind her, a powerful aura sweeping across all directions. Behind Liana, the three goddesses who governed reincarnation exchanged glances and then took a step forward. Eunomia of spring and new beginnings released the breath of life, which in the hands of Dike of summer and blessings, became vibrant and strong. Finally, this force fell into the hands of Aranus of autumn and endings, and its nature was changed in an instant. The divine power of the three goddesses was not strong, but when they cycled together, they produced an effect far greater than the sum of their parts. The power that burst forth in that instant commanded Hestia's attention and, needless to say, that of Keto, standing before them. Has this damned one finished yet? Glancing downward, Keto's complexion turned ugly, but the three goddesses of reincarnation clearly would not hesitate on account of this. Exchanging a look, under the control of the three goddesses, the power of the cycle formed a special barrier in an instant, enveloping Keto. The 12 gods of stars released starlight, faintly linking with each other to seal off the outer space. In a confrontation, Liana had not yet acted, but everything seemed to be settling already. Under the heavenly net of the spirit realm deities, Keto had no chance to evade. By her side, Hestia seemed ready to say something, but in the next moment, her expression suddenly changed. Protective divine power enveloped her, and on the other side, Liana's expression shifted slightly as the moon shadow behind her pressed directly towards the barrier where Keto was located. The phantom of the nether moon was overwhelmingly powerful, the very void trembled ahead of it, causing Hestia's gaze to grow more solemn. If Hestia's incomplete godhood of fire meant that she was barely achieving a divine power level of 16, standing at the threshold of great divine power, then the goddess of the nether moon in front of her was at least 2 levels stronger than her, if not more. True to being the only celestial avatar of the Underworld, even if the Underworld was far less expansive than the Earth, the starry sky had sun, moon, and stars, but the Grey Plains only had one nether moon. However, in the next moment, this moon shadow was halted abruptly by a figure that suddenly appeared before it. The formidable force silently dissipated as if the moon shadow had never appeared. The figure was not tall and even somewhat thin. A deity with black hair and blood-red eyes, not known when, stood in front of Keto, looking calmly at the surrounding gods. Let's stop here. Quote. Is it you? Looking at the somewhat unfamiliar figure before her, Liana first showed surprise, and then seemed to remember something. Yes, it feels like a lifetime ago. Take these million human souls as a gift for my descent to the mortal realm, how about that? With a smile, Asmodeus had left a deep impression on the spirit realm deity closest to Laine. Quote. HMPH, seize him. With a cold snort, Liana was one of the few in the spirit realm who had some understanding of the creation of hell. Although she recognized the other party, it was not a reason for her to back down. No matter who it was, anyone who dared to steal from the spirit realm's treasure had only one end. The spirit realm was right behind them, so its angels feared nothing. Meanwhile, in the spirit realm, there was no delay this time. On the contrary, Laine moved quickly. With each step he crossed layers of the realm, and it did not take long before he returned to the surface of Mount Sinai. In the temple of Lops, it was as empty as when he had left. His glance sweeping through the temple, Laine exchanged looks with the young dragon lying on the dragon egg next to him. Bai was full of excitement, showing teeth and claws, trying to convey something to Laine. However, she remembered Laine's instructions from before, so she did not make any noise. With a slight smile, Laine didn't say anything. He simply walked around the desk and sat back in his own seat, lost in thought for a moment. Seeing this, some finally let go of their worries. Quietly, gray wings descended between the tangible and intangible, and melodious music started to play. A drowsy feeling surged, but in the young dragon's eyes, a different scene seemed to be reflected. Illusion and reality were alternating, and Bai was witnessing such a strange sight for the first time. C297. 75. The Falling Star. Hiding in his own dream, Hypnos had already been waiting for a long time. Even now, he was somewhat surprised at how smoothly his journey was going. No one asked him anything, nor did anyone stop him, because this place was not like Olympus, where nymphs acted as servants, moving about the palaces. Crossing the 6th layer of the spirit realm, the god of sleep arrived at the summit of Mount Sinai outright and openly. As he entered the temple of Lops, the divine palace was empty, the drinks on the table still warm to the touch. Not far from the main seat, there were eggs of some unknown creatures stored there, but Hypnos only glanced at them before paying them no more attention. Afterward, there would be plenty of time to look, but now, the task at hand was the most important. That was careless, but then again, who would always be on their guard in their own palace? Walking past the long table, Hypnos noticed that, at some point, a multicolored fire had appeared to the left of the main seat. It shifted between different colors, leaping, rooted in the emptiness, using space itself as fuel, illuminating everything around it. The god of sleep had never seen such a fire before. It was not a product of authority but resembled the golden apple, naturally formed and special. Such a thing was extremely rare in the chaos world, but in this palace, it was merely an ordinary lighting tool. Only old-timers who have lived a long time always have some special things in their possession. Murmuring to himself, Hypnos tried to appear more composed. While speaking, he sensed every corner of the temple. After a while, having walked around the table, the god of sleep ultimately found nothing amiss. An illusion perhaps. With a frown, the youthful deity always felt since entering this palace, there was an inexplicable sensation of being watched, but no matter how hard he looked, there were no other lifeforms present. After hesitating briefly, he finally dismissed that strange feeling, concealing his body within his own dream. Time was running short, and there was no room for unnecessary actions. Besides, he dared not stir up a major commotion in this palace, lest he undermine the effectiveness of his sneak attack. What followed was a time of waiting. Ying. As Hypnos's figure disappeared, a young white dragon poked its head out from behind a dragon egg, surprised at where Hypnos had vanished. Just now, Bai had been silently watching the god of sleep, observing his survey of the temple's interior. She was curious about his purpose, but to her amazement, he simply vanished in the blink of an eye. Looking around, she still found nothing. A sense of loss welled up in her heart, but in the next moment, the young dragon instinctively awakened her innate ability. She opened the eye belonging to the spirit, and then clearly saw Hypnos's whereabouts. It was an undetectable speck of light. The god of sleep had shrunk his dream into a tiny speck of dust, and if it were not for witnessing his disappearance, even if one could see the existence of dreams, it would still be hard to detect Hypnos's hiding spot. Inside it, Hypnos had already taken out the purple flute. This accompanying divine artifact also seemed to have benefited greatly in the process of perfecting the third layer of the spirit realm, its aura becoming more profound. As this, a dream. With a clear voice resonating in her heart, Bai watched that minuscule world of dreams. There was no distinction of size, unruly and unrestricted by any rules, everything depended on the mind of life. In the future, will the realm of dreams be mine? When Laine walked into the temple, a voice rang in his heart. Looking at the excited young dragon, Laine responded to her in the same way. The third layer of the spirit realm, that is the world of dreams. From now on, it will be your home. Gray feathers fell from the void, intoxicating all spirits. The melodious flute played through existence and non-existence, yet it did not rouse anyone's vigilance. Concealed within his own dream, in front of Hypnos, Laine was almost unknowingly enveloped by the power of sleep. The process went unbelievably smoothly, as if from beginning to end, he had no inkling whatsoever. I truly didn't expect it to go so smoothly, but perhaps that's normal. Maybe I'm overthinking it, everything should indeed go this smoothly. Setting down the flute, in the dream, Hypnos's lips gradually formed a smile. Although in the case of a sneak attack, the god of sleep believed there was no one in the world who could be unaffected by his authority, but now that he had truly succeeded, he still felt somewhat excited. He was not overconfident. In fact, Hypnos had some awareness of his own power, but that very awareness instead bolstered his confidence. The current god of sleep, not only had he fused with a bit of chaotic source force at his birth, he had also profoundly experienced the essence of his authority in the process of forging the dream spirit realm, all of which made him stronger than the deity from future mythology. Since the original Hypnos could conspire against nearly peak Zeus with the support of the heavenly empress, now he could only do better. It could even be said that if Hypnos were faced with any other deity, his judgment of himself would be very correct. Crushing a round bead in his hand, following an invisible connection, those spirit realm beings that had already scattered received their instructions. Not knowing how long it would take other spirit realm deities to return to the spirit realm, Hypnos simply chose to strike first, causing these spirit realm beings to create chaos everywhere. C298. 75. The falling star _2. Let them focus all their attention on those places. That way, he'll have enough time to take over the authority of the spirit realm. After completing this last task, the god of sleep turned around and looked at Laine, who was sound asleep on the throne. For some reason, he always felt that the scene before him was somewhat unreal. Perhaps the victory came too suddenly, making him subconsciously a bit overconfident. It won't be, from now on. Taking a deep breath, Hypnos slowly stepped forward. That's how deities are, aren't they? He reached out his hand towards the position of Laine's chest. Before this, he didn't know what the symbol of the spirit realm's authority looked like. He only guessed that it was probably a pen, since the divine artifact that suppressed the core of the spirit realm was a book. And indeed, just as Hypnos had thought, the next moment, he really grabbed hold of an ethereal feather pen. Its color was a gray hue throughout, with dark silver patterns on it, mysterious symbols engraved upon it, and most importantly, it was the symbol of the spirit realm's authority. Now, I am the king. He whispered to himself, his right hand tightening instinctively. At this moment, Hypnos felt as if he had seen an incredibly majestic being. Even his own consciousness became somewhat blurred. He didn't know how much time had passed when he regained consciousness. The god of sleep felt as though he had established some kind of connection with the spirit realm. A powerful sense of force filled his heart, and in that instant, he felt omnipotent. So this is the lord of the spirit realm. At the thought, all the worlds trembled. Having gained this long-desired power, Hypnos could no longer suppress his laughter. Such a feeling was too wonderful. Ha 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 ha. He laughed out loud, and it took a good while before Hypnos could barely regain his composure. Feeling this authority, he looked beyond the spirit realm. With such power, how could he stop here? Next, let the entire world fall into an eternal dream. That's what he thought, and that's what he did. Thus, Hypnos summoned his subordinates, deciding to use the newly acquired authority to enshrine them as gods. It was also somewhat strange why the previous lord of the spirit realm did not enshrine any deities, making it so easy for him to defeat him. Shaking his head, Hypnos felt he didn't need to concern himself with these trivial matters. He stood alone at the summit of the spirit realm, quietly awaiting the worship of billions of spirits. As the god of sleep crushed the orb, simultaneously, in the first 4 layers of the spirit realm, a moderate chaos began to erupt. When Hypnos issued his final command, those lives of the spirit realm who had just recently visited him in the dream domain also received the news. Although no one defied the god of sleep's command, they still made different choices. Some obeyed the order, some delegated avatars and subordinates to execute it, while others shirked their duties in various ways. Under the spirit realm's accrued authority, not everyone was unafraid. Regardless, the spirit realm today was no longer as peaceful as in days past. One after another, the natural passages connecting the different planes were temporarily destroyed, and many lives of the spirit realm fell in the skirmish. No one knew the reason for all this, but the deities of the current spirit realm sensed these events as they unfolded. Or more precisely, the 3 goddesses born with samsara sensed the disturbance in the 4th layer of the spirit realm and immediately informed a companion who had come. This is your arrangement. The phrasing was questioning, but the tone was certain. Although Liana did not know how the other party managed to contact the native lives of the spirit realm, she did not believe it to be a coincidence. In response, Asmodeus faced her with a polite smile. Perhaps so. So why don't we stop here? In fact, there is no need for us to continue this pointless struggle. I also promise you that after today, I will no longer personally interfere with the matters of souls. For a lord of the 9 hells to personally come and compete for souls was not a matter of pride, which meant that there had been secret dealings, else the lord of the 9 hells wouldn't have possibly done so. But that's all for now. From here on out, it's the business of the lords he enshrined and the gods of the spirit realm. After all, with this initial investment, hell's internal circulation was already on the right track. Quote. Listening to the lord of hell's words, Liana fell silent for a moment. The first 3 layers of the spirit realm didn't matter much. No matter how much chaos those spirits caused, they couldn't harm the spirit realm itself, so their struggles truly didn't need to be cared about. However, the all-spirit realm was different. The area around the well of reincarnation swallowed the souls of the whole world, which was far more important than the small Aurora plains. After weighing the pros and cons, what mattered more was clear. But this would be the last time, Liana decided secretly. From now on, she would advise Laine to sever the connection between the 4th layer of the spirit realm and other planes. The sacred ground of samsara did not need to welcome even the native lives of the spirit realm. From now on, Only the water of the river of oblivion or angels who held a portion of the spirit realm's authority would be able to enter this plane. In just a few words, the previously tense situation subtly shifted, and the atmosphere above the human city ruins changed yet again. But this time, the pressure was on Hestia standing aside. Not only because she could not watch human souls being taken away by others, but also because she saw that the unnamed stranger turned around, focusing their gaze upon her. C299. 75. The Falling Star _3. Even that gaze made her feel a sense of inexplicable familiarity. Spirit realm. Tens of thousands of years had passed since Hypnos had seized control of the spirit realm, and he had begun his plan to enter the dream world. He first lured some weaker deities into dreams, then let their primary consciousnesses immerse in false dreams, their physical bodies at his disposal. He eroded Olympus with a war among mortals called Troy, then successively devoured the underworld, encompassed the stars, and even the primordial gods were no match for him. He ruled over heaven and earth, governed the sun, moon, and stars, but he did not accept the position of divine king in the current world, simultaneously becoming the master of both the material and spiritual realms. Because the god of sleep felt that the spirit realm should be above the mortal realm, not equal to it. In the end, when Hypnos stood at the pinnacle of chaos, his gaze turned to the world itself. All beings dream, then I shall make the spirit realm the dream of the world. He intended to lull the laws of the world to sleep, to sink into dreams of his own weaving, and then replace them. For a moment, even the god of sleep was astonished by his own idea. Already possessing everything, he executed this idea without hesitation and then merged his consciousness with the world. At that moment, a sense of detachment and reality flooded over him, and Hypnos, who controlled everything, felt an unprecedented sense of perfection. That feeling. How does it feel? In his reverie, Hypnos heard a familiar voice ask him. Good. I feel an unprecedented sense of reality. He replied subconsciously, yet in the next instant, the god of sleep's consciousness suddenly awoke. He was now the world master, who could speak in his ear. Who are you? He asked, but no one responded to him. Hypnos began to remember, following this familiar feeling. Finally, at the very beginning of everything, he recalled the origin of this sense of familiarity. It was Laine's voice. Memories from the past gradually surged in his heart, and Hypnos remembered, but with that, greater confusion welled up. Gods were immortal, he had taken the reign of the spirit realm, and Laine too should still be alive, but what had become of him? Why did it seem like his existence was completely overlooked? And there were others. At that moment, the god of sleep seemed to understand something, and as he awoke, the world also shattered with him. Everything between heaven and earth turned to ash, his established dominion, the deities he had consecrated, all vanished. When Hypnos came to his senses, he realized he was standing in the center of the Temple of Lops, and Laine was sitting in a chair, quietly watching him. Was I not good enough to you? Sitting in the chair, Laine asked softly. I granted you life, bringing you into this world. I granted you power, making you stronger than what was destined by fate. I also gave you authority, making you the ruler of the third layer of the spirit realm. Now, tell me, what drove you to do all this? Was it simply due to innate influence? After a long silence, a myriad of doubts flashed through Hypnos's mind, such as why, when he was clearly the deity who controlled dreams, he was so easily influenced by the other, falling into his own dream, but now, even if he got an explanation, it no longer mattered. If, despite availing himself of every advantage of time and place, he still could not win, then his defeat was inevitable. Yet, upon hearing Laine's words, Hypnos felt flames ignite in his chest. It's always like this, we're both children of the spirit realm, what does what the world gives to me have to do with you? Ha! Dreams are the activeness of spirituality during repose, the bridge for communication between spirituality and life. I too am a holy being born of the spirit realm, a supreme existence born immortal. Before the existence serving samsara was born, only you and I had innate divine authority within the entire spirit realm. On what grounds do you claim to be higher than me? His voice became increasingly intense, and at this moment, he was not just speaking to Laine but seemed to be speaking to the spirit realm itself. Divine power surged as Hypnos's voice traveled down from Mount of the Gods, and looking at Laine on his high seat, he said word by word. The son of fire shall not bow to the son of earth. I haven't lost to you, it's just that the spirit realm has not chosen me. Evil gods naturally lack intense emotions, but they aren't entirely devoid of positive feelings, it's just that Hypnos reserved these emotions for the spirit realm itself. In his eyes, Laine's significance to the spirit realm was like Gaia's too. The mortal realm, they symbolize Earth, the most primal sanctity of the world, yet they should not be rulers, but rather assistants. But he was different. He was meant to be the king of the spirit realm and then lead it to encroach upon the world, just as he did in dreams. With that thought, everything followed today. Especially as an immortal being, his confidence only grew. Throughout the ages, he had heard the saying, Laine is the incarnation of the spirit realm, but the god of sleep never took it to heart. Because until before samsara began, among all the deities of the spirit realm, only he and Laine held power from the moment of their creation, not even Liana possessed this kind of innate authority. Hypnos didn't know what fate was, nor could he know that in the original history, there was no Liana, but there was him, which is why chaos only bestowed upon him the privileges the world grants to primordial gods. He only knew that he and Laine were equals. I understand, but unfortunately, the spirit realm and I were born together. Rising from his seat, Laine couldn't identify whether his heart was more joyful or angry. In front of him, the god of sleep scoffed at his words. Rushing straight towards Laine, Hypnos's figure charged at him, but witnessing this, Laine turned his gaze to the doorway of the great hall. Even at this moment, Hypnos had not let emotions muddle his head. He appeared to want to fight desperately, but in reality, he didn't resist pointlessly. Instead, he sought to escape, plotting for the future. But obviously, he wouldn't get that chance. Watching the fleeing figure of the god of sleep in a blink, Laine gently lifted his hand, and a segment of a verdant wooden shaft appeared in his hand. Its Gingnur ability to never miss had been transferred onto other sections, but it still retained a wee bit of primer. Now, that small bit of primer was ignited. When it was hurled forth, it hit its target as destined. This result was meant to be. The spirit realm and I were born together. It exists, I exist, were both parts of Laine's existence. You have refused to serve me. Though you haven't betrayed the Father who made you, you've defied the Spirit. He displays his divine authority through in the world. The voice echoed across the 7 layers of the realm, and watching the departing Hypnos, Laine calmly delivered his final judgment. So be it, I shall expel you from the spirit realm. You once resided in the highest heavens, now, I condemn you to the depths of all worlds. As the words fell, the wooden shaft left his hand, turning into a dazzling light that struck the back of the god of sleep. The next moment, led by the destiny of Gingnur, it carried the deity in front of it along its predestined trajectory. For 13 million years, this is my punishment for you. Standing in the temple, Laine watched the god of sleep wrapped in the glow, free falling from the high heavens, as calm as ever. Meanwhile, outside, as Hypnos plummeted from the mountain, the sky above also began to change. In the sky of chaos, besides the physical stars, there were also intangible, illusory ones, together forming the vast starry sky. However, on this day, one of the stars suddenly shone brightly. It was once a symbol of a deity, illuminating the way in the dreams of all beings, but that was no longer the case. Under the gaze of all beings in the mortal realm, the star fell from the sky, plunging into the mortal realm with incalculable velocity. C-376 Double Sun. Above the starry expanse, the morning star fell westward. Mortals describe the heavens as lofty, recounting that a fall from the sky would take 9 days and nights to reach the ground. To fall from the ground to the underworld would take the same, and from the underworld to the abyss, another 9 days and nights. Even for a deity, this immense distance is by no means trivial. But when pierced by the spear shaft, Hypnos began to sink a millionfold faster. Even the renowned speed of the wind gods and the goddess of rainbow probably couldn't match his descent at this moment. Yet he didn't mind that. The god of sleep looked up at the sky, Sinai's peaks growing farther and blurrier. At that moment, a sense of weakness suddenly surged from the depths of Hypnos' soul, followed by specks of light emerging from his divine body. Those were dreams. Sleep and dreams are one, yet separate, one born from the womb nurtured by eternal night, the other from the blessings granted by the spirit realm. However, the world's gifts also end with the world, and as Hypnos descended, the dominion of his dreams dissipated bit by bit. They returned to the embrace of the spirit realm, becoming a part of it. But what truly concerned the god of sleep was not this. He gazed at the figure that had struck him down, that familiar, Father God. As his godhood was stripped away, his connection with the spirit realm also grew more intense. In that instant, the world he saw seemed to have changed. The figure in the black robe grew blurry in his sight, yet at the same time, clearer. Somewhere between clarity and obscurity, Hypnos could scarcely tell the difference between himself and the spirit realm sky. As he continued to fall, passing through 7 layers of temporal barriers, as if in a trance, the god of sleep seemed to glimpse the other side of the spirit realm. Mount of the gods running through the spirit realm was its spine, the well of reincarnation was its heart core. Moon was its eye, mountain ranges and rivers were its flesh and sinews. It was there, at the very beginning. It transformed all of itself into the world, and the world should likewise be one with it. What is this? Startled, Hypnos's eyes widened. He wished to see more clearly, but the fantastic vision had already disappeared. He had left the spirit realm, the divine authority of dreams had departed from him, and the fleeting glimpse of the scene, for lack of that deep connection, could no longer be seen by anyone. Or rather, that was a perspective that belonged only to the world, one that not even eternal deities were qualified to witness. Wait. Stop. A fierce shout, powerful divine power exploded around him, the god of sleep desperate to see more clearly. He struggled mightily to halt his fall, causing more blood to flow from the piercing wound in his chest. However, it was all in vain. The short spear shaft that passed through his chest also locked all his resistance, and carried by it, Hypnos couldn't even slow his downward trajectory. Shortly after, finally realizing his powerlessness, the god of sleep gave up on resisting. He lay back weakly in the void, descending with the wooden shaft, surrounded by flickers of light floating around him, each containing a life. Previously, with each layer he passed, a portion of his dominion of dreams was stripped away. Simultaneously, the lives obeying his command in that layer were expelled with him, falling alongside. Now, they clustered around the god of sleep as if to guard their king. Hey, a king, huh, the lowest of all realms. It seems you are coming with me to that place, whether you like it or not. With a self-mocking laugh, Hypnos relaxed his body, then fell endlessly. He saw the auroras of the starry sky, the floods on the ground, saw the wraiths in the fields of truth, and then, passing the interface between the present world and the abyss, he fell into Tartarus. The concept of time was erased, with past and future invert, left and right shifted, only Gingnur's absolute destiny remained unchanged. With this remaining force, he was pulled towards that ultimate destination. In the eastern region, Olympus. Boom. Huge waves surged, casting up 1,000 layers of froth. At some point, the seawater initially stirred up by the sea god's offspring, which had stopped at Olympus's outskirts, continued to spread westward. Towering waves, like the wrath of a god, collided with the barriers rising from Mount Olympus. Olympus, this haven of gods unconstrained by the laws of the mortal world, now trembled slightly before the concealed power in the waves. And as the pillar supporting the eastern sky shuddered, it seemed even the firmament trembled with it. Zeus, come out and face me. A roaring challenge rang out, and then upon the crests of waves, a chariot burst forth from the sea. Enormous power roiled around it, and although the owner of the voice did not emerge, his might diminished not at all. In response to the Titan deity's call, atop Mount Olympus, the damaged doors of the temple slowly opened. Zeus appeared first, lightning swirling in his hand, followed by all the deities who had partaken in the deliberations. The divine king's expression was grave. He knew who the caller was, and he had a good guess as to why they had come, but he had no wish to stir up trouble now. After all, the divine court was more vacant than ever before. The higher the divine power level, the clearer the disparity between levels. Facing the ocean deity sovereign, who had reached the peak at level 20 of powerful divine power, only Zeus himself could contend with him. Well known it was, that Thesis, the original goddess of water, was also a tremendous god of water. Myriad river gods and lake spirits obeyed her. Now Olympus had no one able to withstand her presence. C301. 76 double sun _2. Hades was far in the underworld, Hestia had just left, Demeter was not skilled in battle, and Poseidon had blatantly stated that he would stay neutral. The goddess of law had not returned for many years, and the god of sun along with other deities were basically unable to decide the outcome. All of this was telling Zeus just how thorny the enemy before him was. Of course, the situation had not reached its worst. After all, it was easy for gods to rank each other, but hard to determine a victor. If his foster parents insisted on taking action, then Zeus would have no choice but to temporarily avoid the sharp edge. Once Hades and the goddess of Hearthfire realized the commotion here and gathered the power of all the gods, the scales of victory would ultimately tip towards him. However, if things truly escalated to that point, the divine court, established for no more than 100 years, would also become a complete laughingstock. By that time, For gods like Aphrodite who were semi-independent of the divine court, it was hard to say what choices they would make. And as for someone as honest as the god of sun, whether different thoughts arose in him was as unpredictable. At this moment, the divine king once again realized how weak he was at this very moment. Without his brothers and sisters, he simply could not suppress those old masters, the progeny of the Heavenly Father. It's been a long time, my most respected master of the ocean, what wind has brought you here? With countless thoughts in his heart, although knowing it was impossible, Zeus still hoped to receive a benevolent reply. However, the next moment, the voice that emitted from the chariot dashed all his wishful thinking. You know very well, Zeus, that you've assassinated my daughter in ways that cannot see the light of day, the pearl of the ocean. Today is the day I've come to seek justice. Another voice came from the chariot, and Thetis, the original goddess of water, stepped out unfettered, releasing her divine power oppressively. She was the purest water, the mother of millions of rivers, and even facing all gods alone, her presence was in no way subdued. On the contrary, faced with Thetis's questioning, the divine king's expression remained unchanged, but around him, other deities' spirits somewhat faltered. The tale of Zeus and Métis had already circulated among the gods in many a whispered version, and now with the principal party confronting him, it seemed a natural development. At least in this matter, there were not a few who sympathized with the goddess in question. But there were some exceptions. Behind the divine king, Queen Hera cast a harsh glance at Zeus but ultimately still stepped forward to stand by his side. After all, she was the biggest beneficiary. If Métis were still around, how could the role of Heavenly Queen have fallen to her? If this is truly the purpose of your visit, Your Highness Thetis, although I am also saddened by the disappearance of Métis, this does not give you reason to brazenly intimidate the divine court. The tricolor scepter floated by his side, and the thunderbolt arrow was held in Zeus's palm. Now that the intentions of his visitors were clear, Zeus's face grew cold. The current situation was indeed dire, but the couple of the ocean did not know what had just transpired, nor could they be aware that Poseidon had turned a blind eye or that Hestia was not on the mountain of the gods. Instead, to prevent any signs of weakness from being perceived, Zeus not only did not back down, but his stance became even firmer. I can understand your sentiments, but it stops there. Should you attempt to start a dispute on this pretext, then I am prepared to see it through to the end. Boom. It seemed as though Zeus's words had angered them, and the surging waters once again struck the mountain of Olympus, leaving a massive impact noise. The breath of many deities interwove in the sky, and thunder gradually covered half the sky, facing the waves from afar, as if a divine battle would erupt at any moment. However, just then, the sky suddenly flashed, and this abrupt celestial event interrupted the escalating momentum of both sides. The tense atmosphere came to an abrupt pause as gods inevitably raised their heads to look at the sky. Although it was still daytime, a star in the sky released an exceptionally dazzling brilliance. The morning star twinkled and fell to the mortal realm. For a moment, the scene quieted down. Only when the star vanished from sight did the end of the line of sight pass. The dignity of the divine court cannot be violated, but I understand your feelings. Your Highness Thetis, if you're willing, I'm prepared to plant the branch of the golden apple tree given by Mother Earth atop the ocean, that we may share this treasure from henceforth, thereby settling this needless dispute. In the silence, Hera slowly spoke. She knew that Olympus was outwardly strong but inwardly weak, and this battle was one the divine king truly wished to avoid. And as the one who had replaced Métis, it was right for her to step forward. On the other side, Thetis, whose demeanor had slightly receded, finally softened her tone as well. The truth of the matter is well known to all deities, but after all, you are my foster child. Zeus, if you agree to an additional condition from me, we can put this matter aside. Internally relieved, Thetis maintained a still frosty facade. In fact, despite Zeus's bluster, she was equally not an exception. Oceanus was still injured and had stayed in the chariot not to pose any pretense but because once he stepped out, Zeus might perceive the real situation. Thus, if it could be resolved verbally, that was far better than war. Zeus's fierce response had almost left her not knowing what to do. Ah, nothing could be better. If you have any requests, I will certainly do my utmost to satisfy them. Relieved as well, Hera, with the golden crown shimmering above her head, smiled and nodded. Then I will speak plainly. Looking at Zeus, Thetis knew he was the one to make the decision. C 302. 76 _3. This deluge, it was orchestrated by the divine court, wasn't it? It was the Sea Emperor's personal action. In her words, nothing was revealed, and Zeus obviously did not admit it was his intention, but Theseus did not care. Whether it was your intention or not, it makes no difference. Once the floodwaters recede, looking at Zeus, the goddess said indifferently, "We want the faith of the next generation of humans." Boom. The gods were visibly startled, their presences clashing thunderously. The originally calm situation intensified, but Theseus revealed a smile instead. "The secrets you hide may not be as concealed as you imagine, and there are more titans than just the two of us." Glancing at the sky, the goddess said with a smile, "Share the faith with us, or let the ocean become solely our domain, choose one. As long as you can achieve one, all past matters will be left in the past. We will not dwell on this accident. Underworld, Hades' temple. The fall of Hypnos was not limited to the mortal realm. Even from the heart of the fields of truth, Hades still witnessed this peculiar sight. But Hades did not care much, or rather, he did not care much about many things in the mortal realm anymore. The mortal realm belonged to the gods, the underworld was his own. Although there were two goddess neighbors who were not easy to deal with, they never interfered with affairs here, which made no difference to Hades as if they did not exist. So, withdrawing his gaze from the falling star, Hades asked the naiad by his side. "Minta, are those wraiths willing to heed my commands yet? Some have finally agreed, but others are unwilling. In my opinion, Your Majesty, you should deal with those fellows directly." After responding to her monarch, Minta immediately said with murderous intent. Some lowly creatures actually dared to haggle in the presence of the principal god of the underworld, they were truly courting death. "Forget it, Minta. Those who are unwilling, let them leave. Even those who stay may not be very loyal to me," Hades mused, shaking his head. Hades knew that truly loyal subordinates needed to be cultivated personally. "Let them take over the handling of the human corpses afterward, that's what Zeus promised me. With them, the embryo of the undead kingdom can be established, and everything can get on the right track." However, Hades reflected, "I still need a queen of the underworld." With some distress, Hades decided to visit the surface later to see, for the underworld indeed required a proper mistress of godhood to rejuvenate the realm. However, amidst his thoughts, he did not notice the shifting emotions in his servant's eyes. Or perhaps he did notice but wouldn't care, for Hades felt little for affairs of love, and would naturally not pay attention to trivial matters. "Go. The waters in the mortal realm will recede in 9 days and nights, and you will be busy then." With a gentle wave of his hand, Hades turned and walked back to his palace. There was much to consider about the undead kingdom, the most basic being the form of governance. Humans needed to eat, to enjoy, wraiths did not. How to build a reasonable promotion system and establish rules accepted by the wraiths was an urgent matter. Only by integrating the order he established with the new kingdom and by getting the wraiths to spontaneously recognize this operational system could he gain faith in an alternative way. Over the years, Hades had developed some ideas, but there was still a long and heavy road ahead to perfect them. The morning star fell, trailing a long mark between heaven and earth. The abyss could not hinder it. Rather, Tartarus did not stop any life wishing to enter. Traveling amidst chaos, Hypnos unexpectedly found that the scenery within the abyss was not as empty as he had imagined. Matter had already begun to emerge, and even basic concepts of space were taking shape. A multi-level structure, similar to that of the spirit realm, was slowly evolving at the core of this world beyond worlds, a sight quite contrary to the god of sleep's previous understanding. Until, at one moment, at the core of the abyss, he glimpsed the indescribable true face of the mother of demons. She was about to awaken. Maybe in the next second or perhaps centuries later, but to a deity, it all seemed incredibly brief. Yet, for the star that passed by, none of this mattered. For, compared to the very fact that living native creatures existed within the abyss, Hypnos was first struck by the sheer ugliness. Fortunately, the fall of the god of sleep did not cease due to the staff's influence. Just in a flash, he again traversed a layer of the space-time barrier. But this time, he seemed to have arrived at a place similar to the material world. Boom! Radiance streaked across the sky and slammed fiercely into the earth, creating a massive crater. Lying on his back at the center of the crater, Hypnos was motionless, akin to death. The upheavals of the day in just a short half were too intense, so intense that even the god of sleep felt a desire to sleep endlessly. He closed his eyes and rested for a while. After some time had passed and he regained some strength, he reopened his eyes. So this is the bottom of the worlds, not as frightful as I had imagined. Sitting up, Beneath Hypnos, the staff that had once locked away his divine power did not continue to cling to him. It had fulfilled its role, standing upright in the crater, radiating green light. The divine blood left by Hypnos when he was impaled was being absorbed slowly. The staff seemed to be revived with a different vitality, greedily drawing power from its surroundings in this unfamiliar place. However, the god of sleep only glanced at it once, without paying it more attention. C303. 76 double sun _4. Now, understanding the situation here is key. 2 suns. I didn't expect there to be suns in this place. It's just that I don't know where this is, a world within the abyss, it's hard to believe. Looking up at the sky, several islands floated high above, wandering about, while the land was primitive and desolate, with 2 suns hanging in the sky, one to the left and one to the right. Hypnos gently flapped his wings and flew up into the midair. Now, he felt unprecedentedly weak. Having lost the authority of dream and even portions of divine power showing signs of dissipation. After all, in the years past, he had reached the upper limits allowed by his godhood, and now that he no longer possessed a part of that limit, the original power had effectively lost its container. At this moment, his divine power's origin leaked out every second. It formed an illusory gray ribbon of light that slowly floated around his body. Since I can't keep it, I'll give it to you. He sighed, resigned to the fact that he could not retain this power. Hypnos decided not to waste it. With a wave of his hand, the escaping divine power's origin surged towards the beings from the spirit realm that came with him to this strange world, and his aura also dropped significantly. Affected by the god of sleep's divine power, those beings were transformed. As spirit realm beings, they originally had no physical bodies, but now, under the influence of divine power, they began to take shape. Perhaps due to the influence of the source of power, their appearances bore some resemblance to Hypnos. Having lost your own dream domain and being rejected by the spirit realm, you can no longer call yourselves lords of the spirit realm as before. Ah, let it be. It's time to understand this world. The final scene during the fall from heaven still echoed in Hypnos's mind. Subconsciously, he seemed to understand something, yet he was reluctant to believe it. To temporarily avoid thinking about it, the god of sleep set a goal for himself. Someday, he would return to the spirit realm on his own strength and then explore all the reasons clear. Wings flapping. To understand a world, one must start from its edges, and so Hypnos sped across the sky beneath the illumination of the 2 suns. After more than half a day, he finally reached the edge of the world. But looking at this so-called edge, Hypnos felt he had learned something new again. What is this? A wall. The towering black wall stretched upwards with no end in sight, and from a distance, due to the unique rules of this realm, the black wall was utterly invisible. It was only when one approached closely that one could realize how peculiar the edge of the world truly was. Of course, ordinary beings couldn't get close to this place at all. As he neared it, Hypnos felt an increasingly strong pressure weighing down on him, a fear rising instinctively in his heart. But this pressure, which would make any common creature recoil, ultimately could not stop him, so the god of sleep finally arrived in front of the black wall. There are patterns, but they seem natural. So hard, even if my divine power is not apt for destruction, its solidity is comparable to a divine artifact. What exactly is this thing? Reaching out, he felt it a few times, the god of sleep puzzled. He mustered his strength, punching it, but his fist merely slid off to the sides. This black wall seemed not only indestructible but could also deflect the forces struck upon it, rendering the method of piercing a barrier at a single point ineffective against it. Is this a natural creation? How is that possible? Unable to understand, Hypnos circled the city wall. Not knowing how far he walked, he seemed to come upon a joint. There, he suddenly realized that the black wall was actually pieced together, and this place was exactly where 2 pieces overlapped. At this moment, for some reason, an absurd thought surged into Hypnos's mind. Looking at everything, he couldn't help but feel that this black wall didn't look like a wall at all, but rather its scales. Turning around in a daze, Hypnos stared blankly at the sky. At the lowest of all worlds, the most terrifying prison. He had just felt that this place wasn't so terrible, but now, he finally realized where he was. In the sky, there were never any suns. There was only the colossal head of the cosmic serpent, watching the misguided intruder into purgatory with its eyes that resembled the sun and moon. C304. 77 choice. Hell, indeed, is its best destination. Laine settled back into his seat and gestured. Bai fluttered its small wings and flew onto his shoulder. He wasn't referring to Hypnos, although the naturally evil god indeed suited that place. In reality, Laine was talking about the severed pole of Gingnir. Originally formed from the branches of Yggdrasil in the Nine Realms, and having absorbed the remaining vitality of a main root, it finally regained a bit of its former self in the hands of Laine, who wielded a part of the authority of life. Of course, a bit is just a bit, and with only its predecessor's remnants, it could not revert to its previous level or possess power comparable to that of the great. Nevertheless, as an offspring of the World Tree, a progeny of Yggdrasil, it was destined to become an extraordinary divine tree. However, regrettably, there was no place for it within the spirit realm. As the support for the Nine Realms, the power of the World Tree was inherently biased towards material and support, and the power it had been endowed with post-creation leaned towards oaths and bonds. However, the spirit realm was a world of spirituality, with the even more powerful codex of creation at its core, and even possessed its own pillar of heaven. After all, Mount Sinai became increasingly mystical after digesting a third of the symbol that upheld the sky from the collapse of Mount Othrys. Anchoring purity and separation, differentiating chaos and order, it performed its role impeccably. Fortuitously, to prevent a treasure from being obscured by dust, Laine directly relocated it, allowing it to take root and burgeon in the heart of hell. Should it grow three main roots like the previous divine tree, it would ideally connect the three blocked layers of hell. Moreover, besides that, as a creation related to the oath from the Otherworld, perhaps the divine tree, once it matured, could fill the gaps left by Styx in this domain. After all, the Styx River only witnessed the oaths of true gods, as determined by the law itself. It was an authority delegated by this world. And before that delegation, swearing an oath to the world has always been a privilege exclusive to deities. In the future, all creation is destined to spread throughout the world, so if the divine tree could mend this deficiency, it would allow the vows of all beings to become its nourishment, much like how the deities' oaths could transform into the power of Styx. Yet there remained one issue. The oath's power on this lance piece was, in fact, biased. Mortal beings make wishes to the divine lance, and their wishes are invariably fulfilled, but whatever is gained will be lost elsewhere. No one is exempt. Therefore, the oaths witnessed by it in the future will not comprise unilateral commitment. One thing replaces another, and both parties involved in the pact must acknowledge it for the oath to be established. This will be the unique order of hell. Laine shifted his gaze back to the mortal realm. There was still much to be done in hell, but an avatar of his was to handle that. Compared to hell, he was far more concerned with what was happening there. The real era had not yet come, and the existence of Cohen had already surprised him. Now, Laine was growing somewhat impatient. Let it be chaotic. Only in chaos and struggle can life find a way forward. Humans are the first, but they will not be the only ones. Deep beneath the earth, Gaia's tumultuous breath from the change of epoch was gradually stabilizing. She was about to awaken. In the golden apple orchard, that special fruit was also slowly maturing. Bronze humanity was ultimately but a facet of this era. Their extinction had an impact on the structure of the world far less significant than the integration of the remnants of the Nine Realms. Whether they existed or not, time marched on. The courtyard. In just one day, the area around the huge pit created by the fallen god of sleep had drastically changed. Sometime unbeknownst, a fountain had sprung from the bottom of the chasm. Though situated in hell, the splashes it created were crystal clear and immaculately pure. Flowers of various colors bloomed one after another beside it, seemingly with this spot as their core. A vitality and beauty starkly different from purgatory began to spread. And by the side of the fountain, a small sapling swayed gently in the wind. With its 8 branches and lustrous leaves, it shimmered like gold. Between its perfectly proportioned branches flowed dreamlike hues. Yet this magnificent spectacle, so incongruous with hell, had no audience, not only due to the courtyard's innate emptiness but also because the god of sleep who had brought it to hell had altogether forgotten its existence. Standing on a floating island in the boundary sky, Hypnos glanced nervously at this world that seemed normal. Knowing the true nature of this place, every second spent here discomforted the god of sleep. He had no desire to stay on someone else's body. Thus, wielding his newly granted authority, Hypnos drew a line in the void before him. A portal opened in response. Stepping through, reality shifted before his eyes until he set foot on solid ground once more, sighing with relief as he took in the starkly different surroundings. There was no longer a luminary in the sky, yet day and night were still distinguishable. Though he didn't know where the light originated, it was much preferable to what had been before. Hell, the abyss, truly terrifying, Yet this is where I shall reside. Surveying his surroundings, this still unnamed third layer of hell looked more barren and harsh compared to the courtyard, even harboring some life forms. However, in strict terms, this was precisely the appearance that the nine hells should have. C 305. 77 choice _ 2. But thinking of the previous brief exchange with the giant serpent, the god of sleep was somewhat at a loss. With eyes open for daylight, eyes closed for night, when the ancient serpent that encircled the world turned its gaze upon him, Hypnos dared not move an inch. Just as when he was newly born and promptly showed reverence to Laine, this time, the god of sleep similarly submitted to this terrifying creature with all his heart. Unexpectedly, the world-encircling giant serpent did not do anything to him, but was even willing to communicate. From the other's words, Hypnos learned some basic information about this place, such as the structure of the nine-layered world, the existence of demons, and the lord of the nine hells who created it all. In the end, the giant serpent gave him three choices. As an outsider, the god of sleep could not simply linger in someone else's domain. To work for them, work for the lord of the nine hells, or be expelled from hell to wander in the abyss, Hypnos could only pick one out of these choices. When faced with the choice, after little thought, Hypnos chose the first one. Having lost the power of dream, the divine power of the god of sleep could not compare to the past, and he also re-evaluated the gap between himself and the truly powerful beings. In this situation, rather than hoping that the lord of the nine hells would be a more approachable entity, it seemed better to temporarily follow the orders of this fearsome giant serpent. Moreover, it seemed the other did not have any extra constraints in mind for him, and until departure, the god of sleep had only received one task: to manage the third circle of hell, alongside the lords of the first two levels to fend off the forthcoming abyssal demon lord. If he performed well, the ancient serpent would truly make him the archduke controlling the third circle of hell, granting him the rights to appoint lesser lords. Third circle again, what a coincidence. Shaking his head slightly, Hypnos released the lives from the spirit realm that were in the midst of forming bodies. Since he was here, he might as well settle down. For now, it was impossible to return to the mortal realm, and besides, having done such a thing, the god of sleep knew without thinking that even if he managed to leave the abyss, his exposure would bring about relentless pursuit by the angels of the spirit realm. By comparison, it would be better to rest and recuperate in hell for a while, and in the meantime, experience what it was like to be a lord akin to a territorial god and see how much it could enhance him. In deep thought, Hypnos stood on a desolate hill, quietly observing his future domain. Respected god of sleep, it's been quite some time. However, what brings you here? Suddenly, a voice came from afar, and Hypnos swiftly turned around. Perhaps still unaccustomed to the environment of hell, he hadn't noticed the approach of the newcomer before. At a glance, he immediately recognized the newcomer. It's you. With eyes slightly narrowed, the god of sleep locked onto this deceptive-looking young man with a smile. Not long ago, they had conspired together. Even until the moment the other stole souls, Hypnos was fantasizing about how to deal with him afterwards, but he never thought they would end up in the same place. With today's experiences, Hypnos vaguely understood why the other aimed for souls. Hell needed souls, and Mefisto had probably gone to the surface for this purpose. There didn't seem to be any conflict between them, just mutual exploitation, yet vaguely, the god of sleep always sensed that the other knew from the start that he was doomed to fail, but he did not expect him to also come to hell. Even putting that suspicion aside, in Hypnos's heart, there were still some thoughts he found inconvenient to express. He and Mefisto had taken action one after the other, both treating each other as tools, yet the other had successfully completed his task, whereas he fell to his current state. No matter how he thought about it, the god of sleep was not willing to see him at this time. Yes, esteemed highness. The lord of the nine hells once said that the third circle of hell would welcome a new manager, and now it appears to be you. With a smile still on his face, seemingly oblivious to Hypnos's subtle hostility, Mefisto took a couple of steps forward. The respected prince of the spirit realm actually falling into hell was indeed beyond a demon's expectation. Something you need. Laconic, the god of sleep spoke coldly. Haha, I primarily came to visit my future neighbor. If all goes as expected, the second circle of hell will be my domain in the future. Of course, it might just be a part of it to start with, but I don't think the rest will prove too much trouble for me. Raising an eyebrow, Mefisto paused for a moment, then made a suggestion. If you're willing, I might take you on a tour of hell. Along the way, we can let the demons of the third level know who their future master is. Without answering immediately, Hypnos took a careful look at the demon before him. In terms of aura, even in hell and under the bolstering of the energies from the barriers, Mefisto could hardly be considered a powerful being, but now the god of sleep had learned a lesson. Mere pretense and strength might not be enough to achieve his aims. So, although he didn't know his purpose, Hypnos eventually nodded. Mortal realm. Above the western sea, the sky was cloudless. As if all the moisture had been gathered in the east, the sea was unusually dry. The closer one got to the west, the sky seemed nearly to touch the ocean surface. Under this inexplicable pressure, few creatures wished to linger nearby. By comparison, even the icy northern seas seemed more vibrant than this place. C306. 77 choice_3. However, on this day, the far end of the west heaven welcomed a special visitor. Shrouded in a black robe, Asmodeus walked on the surface of the sea. Just as gods in the mortal realm are suppressed, and as Laine would cause a collision between the spirit realm and the law if he used his power, so it was with him. Moment by moment, in the east of the continent, the power of the nine hells eroded the order of the mortal realm with that ceremonial track as its core. The current hell obviously had no qualification to contend with the laws of the mortal world. It could persist till now only thanks to its uniqueness. Since the abyss had no conscious living beings, Tartarus once again took the hit for the hell within himself. Most of the pressure ultimately fell upon him, and the nine hells bore only a small part of it. But this was only a temporary solution, so Asmodeus, although appearing to walk slowly, did not delay at all. It's just that the world was still too vast, so by the time he finally reached the end of West Heaven, the pressure of the law on him had nearly reached its peak. Fortunately, right in front of him, the Titan deity revealing his true form was already clearly visible. The immense deity stood towering, bearing the sky on his shoulders, accompanied by the stars. The effort of all this was obviously not easy for him. Moment by moment, the divine power that Atlas drew from his godhood would slip away in the next instant, becoming the force that sustained the heavens. He was forced to endure this sensation of weakness constantly, without a moment's rest. Yet, when they met again, Asmodeus saw no sign of decay or despair on his face. He simply carried the sky quietly, as if he were waiting for something. It's been a long time, Atlas. Speaking softly, the Lord of the Nine Hells didn't know what to say or where to begin. The giant deity in front of him had long since noticed his arrival. After all, he hadn't concealed his tracks, but the other had only quietly watched as he approached. Only now, standing before him, hearing this greeting that lacked both beginning and end, the Skyholder suddenly laughed. It's been a long time indeed, Your Majesty. Your new appearance is much more imposing than the old one. A bit at a loss, Asmodeus soon laughed as well. Despite the different aura, different godhood, and even a different existence, the other still recognized him. Was it that his style was too unique? Asmodeus did not know, but for a moment, he found himself thinking of Hestia and Rhea. The former did not recognize him, which was not surprising since most of their time together was spent with her inside his belly, and the few times otherwise were on the battlefield. As for Rhea, one could only wonder what her reaction would be if she saw him. But these were only speculations. Now, the Lord of the Nine Hells did not wish to see her yet. You have suffered, Atlas. Once, fate mercilessly foretold my defeat and mocked my futile struggles with the betrayal of those closest to me. But all that is in the past. Looking at Atlas, Asmodeus reached out. I have come to take you away, to leave this cage. Follow me to hell, where you will, like me, be reborn. I would very much like to leave with you, Your Majesty, but I am afraid I cannot leave right now. Why not? Because the sky needs support, Your Majesty. Shaking his head, the giant deity looked towards his northeast at the bronze pillar. When Mount of the Gods fell, the symbol of heaven's support split into three. Olympus received one part, and I merged with another. As long as I support the sky, the current laws of the mortal world limiting the divine power of the gods do not apply to me. However, correspondingly, as long as the symbol of support remains with me, I am bound by the law and can never leave this place. Unless a replacement can be found to bear this symbol in my stead, only a power that can tear through the rules of this world will allow me to leave. I thought that Bronze Pillar might be capable, but now it seems it is far from having such ability. His expression changing subtly, Asmodeus had not expected such a turn of events. Yes, he now understood. Although Atlas was punished to bear the heavens here, as soon as the laws of the mortal world realized his existence truly helped stabilize the world, regardless of whether Atlas had come voluntarily, he was directly stripped of his freedom. Like he decreed the destiny of replacement for the divine king, like he whimsically tore apart the divine authority of the deities, the law cared only about pros and cons, not about the fairness in the eyes of living beings, or rather, just as the gods take from their mortals as they please, in the eyes of the world, deities and mortals may well be no different. Therefore, unless something can replace Atlas, the law now forbids the sky holder from leaving. And that newly erected bronze pillar, although it stopped breaking apart after the son of the sea god was trapped atop, only took on 1/10 of the weight from Atlas. Such a pillar was clearly far from capable of bearing the symbol of heaven's support. There's no need to worry, Your Majesty. Just as you ultimately broke the destiny decreed by the divine king, I believe you can also solve this problem. It only takes a little more time. With shoulders bearing the weight of the azure, Atlas noticed Asmodeus' anger. The mortal world had created so many troubles for him, and even after leaving the throne, it had not ceased. However, the sky holder only smiled, as if he didn't mind too much, or perhaps he simply believed that the difficulty was only temporary. I will wait for you here, Your Majesty, for the day you return to the earth. By then, you will certainly have the power to change everything, and I will once again serve as your sword, overthrowing the divine court of Olympus. I will tell those ignorant rebels that the Titans are the true masters of the world, and you, the only king. Over the western sea, no life witnessed all this, only the wind and the waves, flowing endlessly. C-307. 78 heroes. Do you have any other solutions for propping up the sky? In hell, next to a sapling that had grown to half the height of a person in just a short time, the avatar of Asmodeus inquired. He was there because of Hypnos' affairs. Long ago, Laine had already said that he would send a lord to the third level of hell to stand with Creus against the abyss, as it was expected that, sooner or later, neither he nor the lord of the nine hells would be able to intervene personally in the war between the two realms. As the founder of the nine hells, it was natural for Asmodeus to use the power of the planes to counter the pressure of the abyss itself. Compared to Tartarus, the newly formed nine hells were still too weak. And it was doubtful whether the world serpent could spare any effort, as it also had to deal with Moya, the mother of demon gods. After all, an incarnation couldn't possibly mobilize the power of the spirit realm within the body of another primordial god to confront him, so with only 3 levels of hell reinforcing his might, he wasn't capable of sweeping all before him. Fortunately, the new deity was not weak, and with the advantage of terrain, he still had the strength to fight. I know what you're trying to say, but this isn't a matter of erecting a few more pillars in the Western Sea. The sky has both an actual weight and a conceptual weight. Bronze pillars can share the actual weight, but the conceptual one can only be solved by symbols divided into 3 parts, something that pure quantity cannot replace. Standing next to the Lord of the Nine Hells, Laine appeared somewhat ethereal. To take, one must first give. It was the power of the world itself that nourished the divine tree, allowing it to grow. Now, its main root had sunk into the heart of the courtyard, greedily drawing power. Of course, this was just an extravagant gesture initially carried out to revitalize the sapling. Moving forward, whether it was the Tree of Oath, named Nordacier by Laine, or Leon or Spring, both would have their own ways to grow. What about crafting a divine artifact? With a shift in his thoughts, Asmodeus thought of another solution. Often, divine artifacts could replace deities in exercising authority, and since the sun chariot had been made before, it wasn't impossible to create another in a similar fashion. That's possible, but a divine artifact meant to prop up the sky must also possess the authority related to bearing loads, like mountain or strength. Shaking his head, Laine said lightly, if Atlas is willing to give up all his strength to forge it into an artifact, replacing himself to hold up the sky, then I don't mind helping you with that. Even though he said that, both Laine and Asmodeus knew that Atlas, the sky holder, would not consent to such an almost abjectly humiliating end. Or rather, if he truly knew how to be flexible, he would not have refused to surrender to Olympus. Those with steadfast will often have their own form of stubbornness, as was the case with Atlas. If a single divine artifact requires a congruence of authority, perhaps it might not be necessary if there are enough of them. After a moment of silence, Asmodeus seemed to ponder something. Divine artifacts couldn't be crafted at will, but from his tone, it seemed he had a way to obtain materials to forge more than one. Of course, propping up the sky doesn't mean fighting against the sky itself, but merely lifting it. A quantitative change can indeed lead to a qualitative one. Nodding, Laine spoke with a smile. However, I do have another better idea, which might just take some time. What are you planning? Upon hearing this, Asmodeus seemed rather lukewarm. It's not about planning anything, just because of a prophecy. Laine was indifferent to the Lord of the Nine Hells, rather cool attitude. Prophecy. Yes, prophecy. Although it had been a long time since the so-called prophecy had been spoken, this time, it was truly a prophecy. Except the seer wasn't Laine himself, but another being with a special connection to the former second-generation divine king. He tried to divine his own future and indeed received an omen from destiny. However, he himself did not understand the meaning of the message. Seeking an answer from his teacher, Laine overheard the discussion. Actually, Laine thought that because of his disruption of fate, some things would no longer happen, but now it seemed that the power of destiny was still resilient. But that didn't matter, for he would continue to change it. Vaguely, I see that in the distant future, a human will complete 12 incredible feats for mere mortals, his steps covering the earth, the sea, the underworld, and through them, ascending to divinity. However, unfortunately, even though I've seen this scene, I still don't quite understand how he can accomplish it. So you want to intervene in this? Looking at Laine, the Lord of the Nine Hells asked calmly. Then why don't you go and do it yourself? I will. Shaking his head, Laine said lightly. But one example is not proof. I need different samples from various perspectives to see clearly what exactly this so-called great achievement has brought him. You can participate or not, as it doesn't affect your plan to forge divine artifacts, right? Quote. Let's talk about it when the time comes. As for humans, Mefisto will keep an eye on them for me. I must say, in his case at least, I've seen the wisdom of humanity. It was unwise to pin hopes on an illusory future, so Asmodeus merely kept this in mind without much expectation. C 308. 78 Hero _2. Especially prophecy. Having experienced firsthand the terror of fate, the Lord of the Nine Hells held it in a certain awe and kept his distance. On the earth, in the blink of an eye, the sun and the moon had taken their turns several times, and the tides of the eastern part of the continent were rising higher and higher. Low mountains were submerged, rivers either widened or redirected, torrential rains seemed endless, as if there was no end. But amid these tumultuous waves, there was a small exception, a simple wooden raft. The tides ceased around it, strange beasts stayed far from its presence, and so it drifted aimlessly upon the flood, carrying the two aboard without a destination. There was no drinking water on the raft, for the downpour from the sky avoided it, and that from the sea was undrinkable. There was also no food, for the birds of the sky had drowned in exhaustion in the water, and no fish or shrimp survived in these tides that defied the laws of nature. Fortunately, the two on the raft were not mortals, they were children of gods. Though the divinity within them was near absent, making their strength barely greater than that of mortals, this ultimately spared them from death by hunger and thirst. So, adrift, several more days passed. It seemed the waters might be receding, and one day, after an accidental collision, the raft came to rest upon an unnamed mountain peak. Enduring their exhaustion, Deucalion and Pytha climbed onto the only piece of land they had encountered in their drift, but when they reached the summit, they witnessed an incredible scene. The waters abruptly halted at this mountain peak as if some invisible force had severed them. On one side of the mountain was an expansive plain, untouched by a drop of sea, while on the other, relentless waves continued to pound the mountain's body, causing a tremendous roar. Upon closer inspection, one could see that on the plains, there were some structures that were clearly not of natural origin. Quote. This is the Panassus mountain range, have we really drifted for so long? Finally recognizing his location, Deucalion was shocked despite his disheveled state. He had heard of this place, even seen images of it, all told to him by his father Prometheus. For him, it had been merely myths and legends, until today, when he stood here in person, beholding this ancient land. Perhaps it was precisely such a place that could bring the monstrous flood to a halt because this was where the Temple of Delphi lay, the resting place of Mother Earth. The Golden and Silver Ages began here. It witnessed the history of the Second Era. This was truly a sacred ground of exception. Anyway, we survived. Regaining his senses from the shock and unwinding his tense mind, Deucalion smiled bitterly. His father was captured, he could only live with his uncle's family, but then, recently, Epimetheus and Pandora left without a word. When he and Pytha returned to the residence with the garden, it was just the two of them left. They were bewildered for a while, but just as Deucalion was coming to terms with everything, the great flood came. Now, forgotten exhaustion surged back, and he sat on the ground without any image, while Pytha had already leaned against a boulder atop the mountain. Looking at the tides cut off by the mountain range, Deucalion felt at a loss. With all spirits wiped out in the disaster, even if the floodwaters subsided, how would he and Pitha go on living? However, just as he pondered, a faint, hesitant voice came from beside him. Fulfilled. What did you say is fulfilled? Deucalion turned to look, only to find Pitha beside him, murmuring to herself. Having encountered such a disaster soon after leaving her parents, she felt an immense lack of security. The calamity. Father once said that one day, the divine court would bring down the calamity, to destroy bronze humanity and their traces. I always thought it was a scary story he told me, but now, viewing everything before her, Pitha's face turned somewhat pale. What? Deucalion knew his uncle Epimetheus well. He was famed among the gods for his foolishness, but now, it seemed he had foreseen this calamity. It could be an accident, and it would be best if it was. Deucalion comforted himself, not because he couldn't accept a non-foolish Epimetheus, but because he thought of more. If his uncle had known about the destruction of humanity beforehand, did that mean that the gods had plotted this disaster long ago and that both bronze humanity and the creatures of the earth, even he and Pitha, were insignificant sacrifices and pawns? If this were true, it meant they were still in danger, never far from the threat of death. Did he say anything else? Collecting himself, Deucalion asked again. At his words, Pitha paused, then seemed to suddenly remember something. He also mentioned, Princess Themis is a god of justice, the embodiment of righteousness. If one day we face an insurmountable calamity, we might seek her aid, for among the gods she is the most trustworthy. The most trustworthy. His heart sank again. Under her parents' protection, Pitha had never encountered hardship and wasn't sensitive to such things, but Deucalion read between the lines. Why seek help from the most trustworthy god? Because the others are not trustworthy. Perhaps his guess was right. The real danger for him and Pitha had not yet arrived, and only the witness of the Master of Law could prevent the worst outcome. C 309. 78 Hero_3. Then let's do as you say. Pitha, trust in your father, his parting words to you must be of use. Deucalion said with a forced smile. Okay. Pitha, who had long since lost her own opinion, nodded immediately and, together with Deucalion, knelt down and began to pray silently. Themis, goddess revered by all spirits, whose light shines upon all, your thoughts remain ever pure, your judgments never false. Please hear me out. Life has left the earth, only we remain in the mortal realm. I have lost my way forward, please guide me. Her voice was not loud, but being near the oracle, a place marked by the gods, her plea carried. After what felt like an eternity, just when Pitha thought the goddess was not inclined to heed her, a voice whispered in her heart. I understand. Wait here, offspring of Iapetus, the guidance you seek will soon come. Relieved, Pitha couldn't help but smile, while next to her, Deucalion's eyes flickered with the look of a survivor of a catastrophe. The wisdom inherited from his father proved especially effective in adversity. During their prayers, Deucalion had an inkling of what was to come. They had survived the disaster as if by a joke, while mightier beasts than them were consumed by sea monsters to the last, yet he and Pitha were not harmed. This was not an act of kindness from the gods, but because they were still of use. But being of use now did not imply being of use forever. The existence of the goddess of justice may allow them to evade disaster when they become useless. After all, they were not deities, and just as beings as insignificant as them could be wiped out with a mere gesture from the gods for convenience, they could also be spared because of another god's whim. As for their own opinions, none would care, just as no one had cared for the lives lost under the floods. Humans, at least, had garnered attention, while the rest of life, the gods didn't even bother to glance at them. Squeak. Bang. Atop Mount Olympus, the doors of the divine palace slowly closed. The gods took their seats one by one, the atmosphere growing even stranger. The god of the ocean and his consort had left. Though Zeus had politely invited them to the feast out of courtesy, neither Oceanus nor Theseus seemed keen on staying for discomfort. After today, the cordial relationship they once enjoyed was no more, but the oceanic couple did not care. Zeus's ruthlessness towards Métis had made clear to them the true nature of the new divine king. For him, interests clearly outweighed so-called emotions. If that was the case, they saw no need to maintain even the facade of a relationship. Elsewhere, facing his formidable foster parents, replete with implicit threats, the divine king eventually compromised. He did not relinquish his claim to the oceans, even though he wasn't particularly keen on protecting Poseidon's interests. Regardless of his true feelings, Zeus was forced to allow the Oceanus lineage to meddle in matters of faith, even though this posed an immense threat to him. The offspring of the Oceanus lineage filled the earth as river gods and lake gods. Despite the world having undergone several wars, leading most newborn rivers to lack corresponding territorial gods, their progeny remained numerous. Zeus could almost foresee his foster father spreading his influence through the new humans. But he went ahead with it because if he chose to abandon Poseidon first, leaving aside how many deities on Mount Olympus would stand with him, Hades in the underworld would completely sever ties with him. And this time, even Hestia would likely not stand by Zeus. So even though he had disagreements with Poseidon, Zeus still rejected the original goddess of the ocean's other demand, swallowing the bitter pill alone. It's so unstable. Here I thought the divine king's word was law. Aphrodite said from her own seat, resting her chin in her hand, as beautiful and seductive as ever, though her thoughts were quite the opposite of the smile she wore. The goddess of beauty had thought the divine king was so powerful, but now it seemed, not so much after all. That's normal. Apart from the first divine king, there has been no ruler who truly governed the world. Zeus might have discovered faith, but frankly, I'm not very optimistic about him. The god of sun muttered agreement, momentarily distracted by the unintentional charm of the goddess of beauty. He quickly gathered his wits and looked up at the divine king at the head of the hall. Luckily, either he wasn't heard or Zeus didn't deign to look his way. Enough. The matter is settled. In any case, the old humans are gone. Detecting a wavering of hearts, Zeus spoke gravely from his throne. Now, with all settling, it's time to begin a new era. Zephyrus. Sire. Your command, please. The wind god stood from his place, ever obedient to the word. As the waters recede from the mortal realm, seek out the children of Prometheus and Epimetheus. Through their hands, let new humans come forth. But remember, gazing at the god of west wind, the divine king said quietly. The new humans need no guidance. Let them discover the world for the first time on their own. The post-deluge Earth won't be so dangerous for a while, and they won't suffer heavy casualties, but it will be tough enough for them to learn the hardships of survival. Then, sire, what of Deucalion and Pytha? Zephyrus asked again, respectful in his tone. Humans don't need them. Humans only need the gods. Hesitating briefly, Zeus ultimately gave a noncommittal answer. Yet, seeing the west wind god's knowing nod, he believed the other understood what to do. With a nod in response, Zephyrus disappeared like the wind, and the great hall fell silent once again. This time, however, Zeus could see their spirits being much more attentive. To them, their own immediate interests seemed to weigh more than any humiliation faced by the divine king before the gods of the ocean. Yet before that, there was still one more matter to attend to. Poseidon, my noble brother. With a smile finally gracing his face, Zeus felt some of the gloom lift from his heart. Do you remember the wager you once proposed? C. 310. 79. Besides my lord. As these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the great hall instantly changed, and many deities cast their eyes toward Poseidon's direction. The gods still remembered how confidently the Sea Emperor had established the bet, with the deities placing their wagers one after another. But now, it seemed he was the one who had lost most thoroughly. Of course, most of the other deities hadn't won either, given that such an outcome was truly unexpected. However, when no one guessed correctly, it was naturally assumed that the one whose guess was closer to the truth was the winner. Yet, in front of the other gods, Poseidon showed no sign of feeling defeated. Hey, yes, I lost. So, what are you going to do? Seize the islands in the sea from me, or some other place? With a scoff, amidst the expressions of realization, surprise, or expectancy from other deities, Poseidon picked up his cup of nectar and took a drink, easing some of the frustration in his heart. The reason Nereus had suggested that he bet with Zeus before coming here was exactly that. Winning would have been great, but losing didn't matter. If he couldn't get the place closest to Olympus, then the nearby seas were the most suitable for him. And since there were no other sea gods in the divine court, Poseidon actually suffered no loss without any competitors. On the main seat, Zeus wasn't too disappointed with this outcome. For him, it was sufficient to legitimately dismiss Poseidon's desire for the land. As long as he could cut off the possibility of the other setting foot on land from the start, the latter probably wouldn't succeed later on. After all, he still needed Poseidon to trouble his foster parents, so upon seeing this, the divine king merely raised his hand to silence the discussion among the gods. Enough, Poseidon. Since you have admitted defeat, stay in your sea. Responding with a cold snort to this, Zeus merely had to move his thoughts, and a map of Olympus and the sea, including the southeastern part, appeared before him. The map didn't show a simple arc for the coastline, but rather, it jutted out in parts. The eastern region of the continent was also fragmented by rivers and straits. Even in the nearby seas, there were many large islands. If Laine were to evaluate it, it would somewhat resemble the Greek peninsula, but there were also significant differences. At the very least, there was no more vast land to the east of it, which is also why the Caucasus Mountains were nowhere to be seen in the original myths. Seeing that the attention of the gods was drawn, Zeus spoke indifferently. Now that all is settled, I, in my capacity as the divine king, hereby. Boom. A muffled sound interrupted Zeus's speech. The doors of the great hall were violently pushed open, and as the gods turned to the noise, accompanied by a flash of fire, the figure of Hestia appeared inside the hall. However, unlike when she had left, the goddess of Hearthfire's expression was very solemn, and her breath somewhat unsteady. My respected sister, who dares to lay a hand on you? Zeus was the first to stand from his seat, clearly noticing that Hestia had just been in a skirmish, and she likely hadn't had the upper hand. In the entire Chaos world, there were few beings that could defeat a deity skilled in battle. Aside from those in Olympus, the most numerous were once the world's rulers, the ancient Titan gods. Could it be that right after the god of the ocean and his wife had left, a certain Titan deity had decided to oppose Olympus? It's not what you're thinking, Zeus. I encountered a completely unknown entity. He made a fleeting appearance over the ruins of a human city, then stole the souls of all humans. Shaking her head gently, realizing what Zeus was thinking, Hestia spoke seriously. His power is unfathomable, and intuition tells me he is stronger than anyone present here. That strange deity proclaimed himself Lord of Hell, and he seems to hold no fondness for Olympus. You might need to prepare yourself soon. Hell. Repeating the unfamiliar name, Zeus took a deep breath, feeling the world becoming more unstable. In his father's era, everything had been normal, the world was simply a struggle between the titans. But now, one after another, ancient and unknown beings were emerging. Did he only take the souls? In the hall, a deity spoke out. Whether he did or not, we can't allow the souls of humans to be stolen by someone else. It would leave mortals without any sense of security, said Hera from beside Zeus. Yes, though he only took the souls, it doesn't seem like he's satisfied, Hestia nodded in agreement. If you don't want your future worshippers to live in constant fear of other deities, I think you should do something about it, Hestia got to the heart of the matter. Perhaps the deities didn't care much about where mortal souls ended up, but mortals definitely cared. As the saying goes, people don't worry about scarcity but about unequal distribution, not about poverty but about lack of peace. Once humans learn that their souls will fall into the hands of an unknown entity after death, it's easy to imagine what they would think. In the end, faith can't be forced. No matter how much you verbally profess belief in the gods, it can't change the subconscious fear and awe of the unknown. Quote. I understand, Hestia. I will handle this matter. But since new humans have yet to emerge, let's talk about this later, Zeus said after a brief silence, seemingly having a plan in mind. The gods, seeing this, also felt reassured and focused their attention on the present matters. C 311. 79. Besides my lord _2. Only the divine king himself knew he couldn't really talk about having any certainty of success. Zeus still trusted his sister's judgment, and since Hestia had said that the opponent was stronger than every deity present, it was likely that he was no exception. Zeus didn't know if Hestia had taken into account his most prized weapon, but deep down, he had quietly made a decision. Previously, before the gods had created Pandora, he had felt a vague premonition. Over time, this premonition grew stronger, but he gave up searching for its source. Because along with this intuition, came a warning from the divine authority in the dark recesses of his mind. In the past, Zeus had been engrossed in the joy of discovering the mysteries of faith. He thought time was on his side, but now it seemed that it might not be the case. The world was too unknown, and the Olympian gods were born too late. The so-called hell was not the first place beyond his knowledge, but it certainly wouldn't be the last. So now, the divine king had to take some risks. If the known paths to success were not viable, then the best strategy was to introduce new variables, rather than watch one surprise after another unfold. But I will succeed, just like I once defeated my father. Looking at the gods before him, Zeus couldn't help but recall that afternoon. It was the first and only time he had defeated his father. He had presented Cronus with the wine laced with magic potion. Despite the vast difference in their strength, like heaven and earth, he had succeeded because destiny was on his side. And now, it was the same. After all, whether there was a destined next divine king or not, it definitely wouldn't be today. No one could foresee all the changes in the world, a world that had already changed a lot, so when the divine king had this thought, no one else sensed the subtle shifts of fate. Originally, everything had been done too early, including the birth of humans, the discovery of faith, and so the deities that should have been born hadn't yet appeared, and the divine court that should have been powerful seemed to have no presence. But now, Zeus had finally realized that he had to change as well. But that was a concern for the future. At this moment, the mortal realm was peaceful. The sea gradually receded, taking with it the earth and rocks. The vegetation had long been washed away, and even many of the original hills had disappeared. If it weren't for the fact that this flood was essentially summoned by divine authority, it was likely that these lands soaked with seawater would no longer be suitable for plant growth. However, once the gods recognized this situation, Demeter, at Zeus's signal, accelerated the growth of plants upon the land. So as soon as the flood subsided, tender shoots had already started to spring up from the earth. At the same time, on the original Aurora plains, a certain power dissipated. Shortly after, among the collapsed piles of stones, Cohen opened his eyes. This is. Hiss. He tried to move his fingers, and a sharp pain shot through his entire body, causing him to gasp. Triton's estimate was not wrong. Facing Poseidon's wrathful strike, Cohen, though not dead, was severely injured. He had escaped death but was still gravely hurt. Even though his own efforts had made him much stronger than many naturally born demigods with divine nature, what really set the chasm between gods and non-gods was divine power and authority, and that was exactly what Cohen lacked. Quote. Is everyone gone? Has it ended? After a pause, Cohen struggled to his feet. He looked around, and the area was desolate. The Aurora was no longer a plain. Perhaps because it was the last to be hit by the flood, it had become a rare highland in the eastern continent after the waters receded. The shattered buildings still bore traces of seawater, but there were no signs of people. Did they all die, leaving me alone again? For a long time, Cohen sat on a collapsed column. Looking at this scene, he couldn't help but think of his past. Once, he had personally bid farewell to golden humanity, and now, he had witnessed the destruction of bronze humanity. The difference was that this time humans died because of the gods, and what hadn't changed was his continued helplessness. Deities. Step. Startled, suddenly, Cohen thought he heard a sound of footsteps. He looked in that direction with some surprise. He was eager to find signs of his own kind, and sure enough, at the end of his vision, there was another human like him, a survivor walking towards him. Unlike his own ragged appearance, the approaching figure, though looking decrepit, did not seem to have gone through any disaster. With difficulty, Cohen stood up and called out from a distance. Over here. It seemed that the old man heard Cohen's call and noticed him. Seeing Cohen's condition, the old man gestured for him to stay put and waited for him to approach. Greetings, Your Highness. My name is Humar. I was once entrusted with guarding knowledge, but now, it seems there is no knowledge left to guard. Approaching, Cohen could finally see the man clearly. Clutching a huge stone tablet, his body already steeped in death, the old man's spirit seemed good, and he smiled as he introduced himself. C312. 79. Besides my lord _3. Hello. My name is Cohen, and seeing other people alive after the disaster is really great. How did you escape this catastrophe? Are there other survivors? After a brief exchange, Cohen seemed eager to question the elder. Indeed, others have survived. They all gathered in the place where the sacred fire is, after coming to their senses. In a calm explanation, the elder pointed in the direction of the altar and then continued. As for the way to escape the disaster, it is all recorded on this tablet. A tablet. Upon hearing the elder's words, Cohen finally noticed the seemingly extraordinary tablet in the other's hand. There appeared to be something carved or written on it, but due to the angle, he was still not too clear about it. Yes, I was fortunate to have recorded the details of the event on it. Humar nodded and then suddenly raised the tablet in his hand. Prince Cohen, may I trouble you with something? Of course, but I'm not any prince. He agreed without hesitation, happy to help others within his capacity, but as he said, even though he had been a king, his kingship was more akin to responsibility and duty, not a lofty status. However, Humar just smiled at Cohen's denial. That's even better. Then please take it to where it should go, to the temple where King Zeus was once worshipped. I should have awaited death there, but in the end, I couldn't resist coming out. Perhaps the outside is more suitable for me than being buried there. The old man knew that dying there might preserve his body for 1,000 years, and his soul could live on in that place, but merely living had no meaning. Rather, he preferred to face death with dignity like his predecessors, even asking to start a new life. Across from the old man, Cohen fell silent for a while. After interacting for a bit, he could tell that Humar's end was near, but he couldn't bear to say it outright. Yet, the other man seemed to have long known about it and was not at all afraid. You remind me of a friend, his name is Hua. Hesitant for a moment, Cohen eventually spoke. Really? Humar's eyes brightened as he said with a smile. If that's true, then that's my honor. After taking the tablet, Cohen bid farewell to the old man. He had wanted to accompany the elder a bit further, but Humar refused him. The elder said he still had a day's life, and he wouldn't die so soon. Although Cohen did not understand the source of the elder's confidence, he still respected his choice. Walking on the sparse gravel, Cohen headed uphill. Although the layout of the city was no longer discernible, two places remained unaffected. One was the temple of the king, and the other was the undying sacred fire. Thus, the center of the original city appeared even more pronounced. After the flood, the east was high and the west low. In the southeast of the land, this place could already be called a hill. However, such minor geographical changes were not a concern. As Cohen felt an increasingly intense warmth from his soul, he was relieved to discover many footprints. It looked just as the elder had said. Many from the bronze humanity had survived, which made Cohen quicken his pace. He wanted to go there and see if his newly acquainted friend, Evans, was there. Introduce his faint voices came from a distance, seemingly from the direction of the altar. Due to his injuries, Cohen's senses were not as sharp as before. He could only vaguely hear that there seemed to be someone talking loudly ahead, but he couldn't make out the words clearly. There were many people there, gathering together. He guessed what the survivors might be saying after the recent disaster. Perhaps they voiced discontent with the gods, or uncertainty about the path ahead. But Cohen was beginning to understand that perhaps the hearts of the gods were not so wide, and nobody knew whether they would respond. Limited by his injuries and despite trying to hasten his pace, Cohen still took a while to get close. When he approached the altar of the sacred fire, he finally heard what was being spoken. To his surprise, the speaker was not boosting the human's faith or denouncing the cruelty of the gods but was preaching. He was spreading the faith of another deity. Ladies and gentlemen, after what has happened, I hope you have no doubts about what I'm saying. Standing on a makeshift platform under the scrutinizing eyes of the crowd, Nuo felt extremely calm in his heart. The gods of Mount Olympus are not trustworthy. They look upon mortals as if they were ants and, out of whimsy, bring down apocalyptic disasters. Only he is different. Just before the disaster hit, Nuo had sworn to his own heart. If the god he prayed to really protected the humans who prayed to him, he would spend the rest of his life spreading his glory. Now that the flood had receded, it was time to fulfill his promise. He does not care whether his name is spread, so he left no title behind. He does not care if humans are grateful for his grace, so he did not seek any recompense. But friends, shouldn't humans have a grateful heart, be able to discern truth from falsehood, know right from wrong? Just because God doesn't care, does it mean we shouldn't? Of course not. With a solemn expression, Nuo, a naturally good-hearted person, was not just fulfilling a promise but truly felt he was helping others. To worship such a great deity, who even ruled over the afterlife, seemed beneficial for everyone no matter how one looked at it. So when Cohen arrived, he happened to hear him say loudly, "Today, here, I will establish a church that worships him, to spread his holy name in the mortal realm. That way, when my day comes, I can face him with equanimity because I know that is the kingdom of my Lord, and I will be there, recounting my deeds in life to him." C. 313. 80 No other deities. Atop the hastily constructed wooden platform, Nuo's sermon resonated with the many listeners. Or rather, those who had survived the great flood inherently possessed a purity of spirit unlike others. The doubtful, the deceitful, or those who harbored malice towards others naturally would not believe in the unexpected kindness of others. They did not believe Nuo's words and, as a result, perished in the flood. In contrast, the audience here clearly did not fall into that category. Especially after narrowly escaping death, they were particularly moved by Nuo's words as they gazed upon the desolate city. Despite the resonance Nuo's words found with many, there were still those in the crowd who expressed different opinions. What you say makes sense, but Nuo, perhaps not all deities on Mount Olympus are so unworthy. At least in the previous disasters, it was a goddess who protected me. Stepping out from the crowd, Cavi was still dressed in the ceremonial robe of Hestia. He respectfully saluted the sacred fire before turning towards Nuo. There's nothing to hide now. Indeed, as you all have guessed, in the past, priests deceived others, deceived deities, and deceived themselves. But when faced with death, I ultimately abandoned those thoughts, confessed my sins to the incarnation of all fires, and awaited the punishment she would bestow upon me. Yet, contrary to expectations, just like every one of you, I survived the disaster. As Cavi spoke, dozens of people stepped out from the crowd, sharing experiences similar to his. Perhaps the gods are not all merciful, but not every deity turns a blind eye to mortal calamities. Princess Hestia is one such deity. With sincere expression, Cavi truly felt this way from the bottom of his heart. However, Nuo, your actions reminded me. The goddess forgave my sins, but I should not forget them. From today on, I too should spread the name of the sacred fire in the mortal realm, to repay her grace. A disaster destroyed a civilization, yet it created two saints who felt the calling. Yet unlike Nuo, Cavi's object of faith was different. Your integrity is commendable, Cavi. Not everyone can face their own mistakes and have the courage to change. However, have you ever considered this? Is the sacred fire brought back by the forefather of humans really a manifestation of Princess Hestia's power? Descending from the platform, Nuo approached the undying sacred fire. If not, when you prayed to the sacred fire, who was it that responded to you? Though humans do not know the true nature of these divine objects, many with greater innate sensitivity could sense that the sacred fire Prometheus brought back was not quite the same as the original divine flame. Moreover, it is well known that goddess Hestia is the divine king's elder sister. Would she go against her brother's decree for the sake of mortals? The answer was likely no, especially since Nuo knew that the deity who provided protection during the disaster had also made a pact with Prometheus. Perhaps, if it is not, then I am grateful to the one who saved my life, but my faith remains unchanged. With a calm demeanor, having faced life and death, Cavi had come to understand his own heart. Faith is not so easily altered, and more importantly, as a former priest who served Hestia, he had felt the goddess's presence in her statue countless times before the connection between gods and men was severed, and now, he sensed it again amid the ruins of the city. The goddess had been here, not long ago. For a believer, such ambiguous evidence was enough. Well then, Cavi, I respect your faith. Sighing, Nuo felt a tinge of regret but still blessed his fellow survivor. Across from him, Cavi nodded back, then lit a flame with a fennel branch. I will leave this place and follow in the footsteps of Princess Hestia. Whatever your intentions may be, I wish you a smooth journey. After Cavi left, followed by several dozen followers, Nuo did not hinder him, only watching with others as the group departed. After all, differences in faith at this point were not sufficient to escalate to violence. Moreover, in Nuo's impression, goddess Hestia indeed was a kind deity. She did not hand down punishments like the divine king, nor did she bring floods like the sea god, nor did she take Prometheus like the god of sun. Therefore, Nuo accepted Cavi's choice. Lord Cohen, are you another who survived by the protection of the divine? After seeing off Cavi, Nuo turned to look at the edge of the square. In fact, he had noticed Cohen's arrival while he was speaking, but only now did he have the chance to greet him. There is a limit to mortal sight, and he had not seen the battle between Cohen and Triton as the flood approached, but that did not prevent him from recognizing Cohen. After all, as a swordsmanship instructor, Cohen had some reputation in Aurora City. Seeing him arrive, Nuo thought he might have just woken up in the city. I don't know. Meeting Nuo's gaze, with the dream from a millennium ago that had benefited him to this day flashing through his mind, Cohen gently shook his head. He glanced again at the surrounding crowd but still could not find any familiar faces. C314. 80 No other deities _2. Whether it is so or not, Sir Cohen, it seems that in this world, the only surviving humans may be us. Turning around to gesture, the city walls had long since collapsed, and on these once plains, now a plateau, there was almost nothing to be seen. Perhaps new humans will appear, but no one knows when exactly, and this world, even though cleansed by a flood, remains very dangerous. If possible, I hope we can journey together. You don't plan to stay here and rebuild this city. Looking at the undying sacred fire with some surprise, Cohen then glanced at it. This place was given to bronze humanity by the Olympian gods, but now, when they have destroyed bronze humanity with their own hands, I shall no longer regard them as deities. Shaking his head, Nuo's smile was very gentle. Bronze humanity is the name they gave us, not one we gave ourselves. Humans are humans, and need no other title. I will spread the holy name of the Lord to every intelligent life form until we find a new home that belongs to us. Quote. All right. Looking at the other person, Cohen did not quite know what to do. He was about to nod in agreement, but in the next moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Well done, mortal, you and your kind are different. Who? The soft and ethereal voice sounded, echoing around this sacred sanctuary. The humans, just having been through a disaster, immediately became alert, but they found nothing. The next moment, the void rippled, and a figure that Cohen would never forget slowly emerged. She was surrounded by bands of light, accompanied by twinkles of stars, but this time, she was not wearing the hood that concealed her face. Her holy and perfect visage bore an indifferent regard for all the world, her pristine wings spread out behind her, as she stepped upon the earth, yet seemed not to belong to the mortal realm. What is your name? Ignoring the others, the newcomer looked directly towards Nuo. The lives of the mortal realm were generally unworthy of her attention, but today was an exception. Now, she wanted to see if the other's soul was indeed that devout. Evangeline had not come to the mortal realm without reason. In fact, if possible, she would happily remain in her own domain for 10,000 years, but something different had arisen recently. Due to frequent incidents, the angel had still come forth. First, there was someone in the outer realms brazenly stealing souls, prompting her to temporarily guard the cycle of samsara, and just as it happened, during her watch, for some unknown reason, the lives from the third layer of the spirit realm had made their way to the all-spirit realm, causing quite the chaos. Although in terms of strength, no spirit realm lifeform could contend with an angel of the spirit realm wielding partial control over the dimensions, the sheer number of the opposition still led to many souls being affected. Of course, no one could have foreseen Hypnos' actions earlier, so Liana, having returned to the spirit realm, bore no resentment towards her. However, to prevent a similar incident from reoccurring, they decided to seal off the paths from the first 3 layers of the spirit realm to the deeper realms. At this juncture, Liana needed to be personally involved and could not leave, so other matters were once again handed over to Evangeline. The goddess of the nether moon had instructed her to check whether the mechanisms beneath the human cities still existed, and if so, to understand how they operated. However, Asmodeus would obviously not leave such a loophole. By the time Evangeline arrived, every inch of the mechanism had already turned to dust, and not even the historical images could be summoned. Because the Lord of the Nine Hells cleverly transferred some of the malice of the current world's laws onto the ritual itself at the last moment. Something destroyed by the current world might not even be seen by Laine, let alone Evangeline. Thus the angel, having returned without success, felt somewhat frustrated. She wandered aimlessly upon the earth, intending to see the flame that once belonged to the sun chariot and now fell into human hands. However, when she arrived here, she unexpectedly overheard Nuo's preaching. A group of mortals from the outer worlds had somehow developed devout faith in the Lord, and this instantly captured Evangeline's interest, a phenomenon quite rare in the past. She knew that the Lord might not care about these things. After all, he had simply scattered some knowledge 10,000 years ago and human faith had been flowing ever since. But for the angels, the outer world's ignorance of the Lord's grandeur was far more intolerable than the lack of the power of faith itself. Suddenly, Evangeline had a special idea. Having failed to find the trace of the soul thief, she always needed to do something, and she believed that even if Liana knew about it, she would definitely support her. What is your name? Thus, revealing herself, Evangeline spoke to this special mortal. My name is Nuo. His expression was solemn as Nuo responded quietly. Facing this sudden turn of events, Nuo's heart tensed for a moment, then relaxed, and even began to feel a sense of anticipation. This strange being appeared to bear no malice, and moreover, had come because of his denouncing the Olympian gods and praising the spirit realm. So, it was quite evident whose side she was on. And before Nuo, Evangeline continued to ask. Among all creatures, you are one of the few who can recognize the greatness of the Lord, that is what makes you special compared to them. But I want to know, for what you speak of, for spreading the name of the Lord throughout the world, what are you willing to give up for it? C. 315. 80 No other deities _3. The voice was like a melody, compelling those who heard it to let down their guard involuntarily, and gaze upon Nuo in front of them as Evangeline waited quietly for the other's reply. In front of her, Nuo's response satisfied her greatly. I will devote everything for the rest of my life, Your Highness. If my life was meant to head towards destruction under the will of the Olympian gods, then every day I continue to live as to spread the glory of the Lord. Very well. The once distant voice now carried a hint of approval, and Evangeline finally nodded her head. This mortal indeed had some redeeming qualities. So, she reached out her hand, beckoning, and in the next moment, an ancient astrolabe appeared in her hand. The phantom images within the astrolabe corresponded one by one with the stars in the sky, yet only a part of them existed. Those were the ethereal stars of the spirit realm. With a gentle toss, it floated in front of Nuo, emitting a faint light. Follow its guidance, and where the stars beckon, build a city, your civilization shall develop there and be preserved. The wings fluttered gently as Evangeline glanced to the west. Over there, those who claimed to rule the world, the false deities, resided. However, remember, since you can see the truth of this world and offer devout worship to the Lord, do not use God to refer to those beings anymore. Taking the astrolabe, joy surged in Nuo's heart. He had not expected his problem to be resolved so easily, but he felt puzzled by Evangeline's last words. He was about to say something when another voice spoke up beside him. Princess Evangeline, do you remember me? Having waited a long time at the side, Cohen finally asked. Looking at the astrolabe presented before him reminded him of the time when he saw the civilization slate. But to this day, he still didn't understand why he was allowed to see the slate. At least Nuo had received grace after expressing his devotion. Evangeline, however, just gave him a glance, showing no more emotion. The first human created by the Lord, of course, I remember you. Her demeanor serene, the angel's wings beat gently behind her. But what about you? Do you believe in the Lord who created you? The moment she spoke, Cohen's heart trembled violently. At her side, Nuo also widened his eyes. The first human created. This brief statement held so much information they struggled to digest it at once. Seeing their reaction and choosing not to say more, Evangeline turned her attention back to Nuo. She had noticed his confusion, and for a mortal willing to spread the Lord's glory, she was willing to spend a little more time. Voice your doubts. As a faithful servant of the Lord in the mortal world, I will answer your perplexities. Quote. Respectful Your Highness, I just want to inquire, why can we no longer refer to the beings on Mount Olympus as gods? Are you not also a deity? Suppressing his awe, Nuo glanced at Cohen out of the corner of his eye, then voiced his doubt. Upon hearing his words, Evangeline smiled for the first time that day. In the past, she had encountered this mistake more than once, but because she didn't concern herself with the outer world, she had never corrected it. However, since the faith of the Lord was now to be spread throughout the world, this error could no longer continue to exist. After all, how could the false gods of the outside world be crowned with the same honor as the Lord? Because it is a mistake. Although the lives of the outer world see me as a deity, I have never acknowledged it, nor have the angels of the spirit realm. Quote, we serve by the side of the Lord, carrying a devotion even greater than yours, because, from the beginning to the end, the all-knowing and all-seeing God in this world, has only ever been one. Floating gently into the air, Evangeline looked down at the people below. Nuo, since you wish to spread the name of the Lord, then remember my words. No matter past or future, whether in the sky or on earth, the truth of this world remains forever unaltered, and the truth naturally cannot be dual. So, for the first time, Evangeline's voice turned sharp. Each person hearing it could feel her sentiment, and she made no attempt to conceal it. She just looked towards Olympus, the same way she regarded all of the outside world. So, besides my Lord, there are no gods.